He thought he was the one replacing his wife. Wrong. She had already replaced him, secretly divorced him, secretly remarried. And when he showed up to a black-tie gala with his mistress on his arm, she arrived with her new husband and calmly destroyed him in public. No screaming, no tears. Just one elegant woman, one deadly secret, and one billionaire's entire life falling apart in real time.
And so it begins. A billionaire husband, Ryan Caldwell, steps into the flashbulb glare of a gala, his mistress draped on his arm like a trophy. He believes he's the master of this universe. He doesn't have a clue that his wife, the quiet one, is the daughter of a dynasty far older and deadlier than his, and that she has already cut him loose and aligned herself with a true king. Ryan lifts a champagne flute, smiling for the cameras, and kisses the other woman in a room of 400 souls while still technically a married man. He thought outplaying everyone. He imagined his wife was somewhere weeping. What he didn't know, she was already inside the building. The divorce was finalized 11 weeks ago, and the man standing just over his shoulder, the one everyone pretends not to see, wasn't there for the party. He was there to settle an account. Now, before this night shatters, a quick question for you out there in the dark. If you feel that a woman's respect is something she holds, not something she has to beg for, hit that like button. Let me know in the comments what city you're listening from. I want to know just how far the shockwaves of this story will travel. Because this is all about to detonate and not in the way he thinks. The setting is the Monte Verde Hotel, one of those landmarks on 58th and Park that seems carved from solid gold. 18 floors of pristine limestone under an awning so white, it puts freshly fallen snow to shame. On the third Saturday of every January, the Hartwell Foundation owns the ground floor for a gathering where a single handshake can build or bury an empire. And for Ryan Caldwell, that room was more sacred than any church. He stands in Suite 1802, admiring his own reflection, adjusting a tie that's already flawless, simply for the feeling of control. 41 years old, a solid 6'1", with a jaw that could cut glass. He'd spent 90 minutes on a treadmill that morning, also the fabric of his tuxedo would fall just so. Nothing about this man was left to chance. Honey. Vanessa's voice pours from the bathroom like warm, sticky liquor. Can you get my zipper? He moves toward her without a word. The dress she chose was red, a shade so deep it was almost black, slashed to the hip, with a back that plunged to the very base of her spine. She is 26. A former swimsuit model who arrived in Manhattan 18 months ago with nothing but 2 suitcases and an agenda that was clearly succeeding. He draws the zipper up slowly, his fingers deliberately brushing her skin. You're starting a fire we don't have time to put out, she whispers. You started it, he replies, the moment you chose that dress. She gives a low, pleased laugh and turns to him. So you're really doing it tonight? Doing what? Bringing me. In front of her, the unspoken name hangs between them, a ghost in the room. I'm bringing you, he states, his voice flat. That is the entire point. She won't even be there. She's not anywhere, he says, adjusting a cufflink. She hasn't been out of that apartment in 6 months, Van. She's a phantom. She reads books. Her groceries are delivered. The doorman probably doesn't even recognize her. And the divorce papers? On my timeline. He taps the face of his watch, a thin gold heirloom from his grandfather that he wears like a medal. Marriage is an asset right now. It keeps the old guard board members comfortable. They see a family man. I'll file in April, after the Q1 earnings call. It'll be finalized by summer. He meets her gaze in the mirror. And by then, you'll have a much more permanent piece of jewelry. Vanessa lets out a sound somewhere between a giggle and a purr, pressing herself against his back. He allows it for a moment, then glances at his watch again. The car arrives at 9. Meanwhile, 43 blocks to the north, in a sprawling suite on the 29th floor of the Arlen, Isabella Varley was at her own mirror, applying her armor. She approached her makeup the way she approached everything in life, with cold precision and absolute intent. A woman named Juliana, who had been flown in from Milan on Wednesday for this one night, stood by silently, holding the tools of their trade. They had worked this way for 11 years. Words were rarely needed. The gown was laid out on the bed, not red. Isabella found red to be a desperate color. Hers was the color of molten platinum, a severe column of silk that fell from her collarbone to the floor, leaving one arm sheathed and the other completely bare. Heels. This was not the dress of a mistress. It wasn't even the dress of a billionaire's wife. This was the gown of a woman who was coming to dictate the end of a story. The earrings? Juliana's voice was soft. The ones from my father. Heels. For a fraction of a second, Juliana's eyes met Isabella's in the reflection before she moved to the safe. 2 flawless diamonds, 8 carats apiece. They had belonged to Isabella's grandmother, Constanza Heels, a woman who had outlived 3 husbands, 2 in Sicily and 1 in New Jersey, and had famously never worn mourning black to a single funeral. Isabella fastened them herself. A knock came at the door. 3 quick raps, then 1 soft. A signal she recognized. Heels. Enter Matteo stepped inside. Heels. The man was 56, but looked as if he'd been carved from old hard wood. He'd worked for her father long before she was born, and for her personally since she was 19. He's waiting downstairs, Matteo said simply. How does he look? Heels. Matteo considered this with the intense focus of a chess master studying the board. He looks like himself. Give him 10 minutes. 10 minutes, Matteo confirmed, and the door clicked shut behind him. Juliana gave one last look, a final inspection. Heels. Bella, you will not shed a tear tonight. It was a statement, not a question. A shadow of a smile touched Isabella's lips. I ran out of tears 6 months ago, Julia. I'm certainly not going to find more in a hotel ballroom. Downstairs, Heels. Sitting in the back of a black sedan with windows just as dark, Luca DeSantis was staring at his phone, his expression radiating pure menace. Heels. He was 39 and tall, but his height wasn't the first thing you registered. It was his stillness, an unnerving calm. He possessed one of those faces that after 30 transcends handsomeness and becomes something else. Heels. Something far more unsettling. The kind of face you see once, look away from immediately, and then find you can't get out of your head. He wore a black tuxedo, a black shirt, no tie, just a small silver pin on the lapel, shaped like an intricate knot. Heels. If you understood the symbol, you already knew exactly who he was. And if you didn't, you had no business being in that ballroom. The car door opened and Matteo slid into the passenger seat. 10 minutes. That's what she said an hour ago. Heels. She's saying it again now. Luca finally lowered the phone. And how is she? Matteo's eyes did that familiar quiet calculation. She's the way she always gets just before it's time. You know. I know. Heels. She was on a call with her attorney at 6 this morning. Anything left to handle? Nothing. It's clean. It's been clean since November. Luca looked out through the tinted glass at the large, slow-motion snowflakes. Heels. He saw a doorman in a heavy coat check a watch for no reason. A woman in a sable wrap was already laughing at a joke a man in a cashmere overcoat was only halfway through telling. Park Avenue at 9:30 on a Saturday night. The performance never stops. Heels. Matteo. Heels. Sir, if a single thing feels wrong in that room tonight, you get her to the service exit, and you do not stop the car until you are across the George Washington Bridge. Nothing is going to go wrong, sir. If anything, Luca repeated. Heels, his voice low and final, goes wrong. Yes, understood. It was settled. Ryan and Vanessa arrived at 9:42. The red carpet was a chaotic sea of camera flashes. Heels. 3 different photographers were shouting his name before the car door was fully open, which was precisely what he paid his publicist $9,000 a month to arrange. He exited first, adjusted his jacket, Heels, then turned and offered Vanessa his hand. She emerged with the practiced grace of a starlet, one leg extended, the red dress parting perfectly. The cameras went wild. They both smiled. For 9 perfect seconds, they were the center of the world. Heels. Mr. Caldwell, this way. Ryan, who's the lovely lady? Ryan, is there any truth to the rumors about you and Isabella? He let the name Isabella drift past him, unheard. He wasn't married to an Isabella. That was a different man. Heels. From a different lifetime. He just deepened his smile, placed a proprietary hand on the small of Vanessa's back, and guided her into the storm. Inside, the lobby of the Monteverde was saturated with the distinct perfume of old money and fresh lilies. Heels. Huge arrangements of white lilies in black vases that cost more than most people's rent and would be forgotten by dawn. A string quartet played softly from an adjoining room. Heels. Young women in identical navy dresses collected $1,000 coats with bored expressions. Heels. Ryan, a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. It belonged to Greg Moulton, a partner from some law firm, his face red, already well into his evening. Ryan, you absolute dog. Who is this? Greg, meet Vanessa. Vanessa, Greg repeated. Heels. Taking her hand and performing a small, clumsy bow. Vanessa, a pleasure. Where has this man been hiding you? Oh, nowhere, Vanessa replied, her voice sweet as cyanide. He's just never been very good at keeping secrets. Greg roared with laughter. Heels. Ryan offered a measured, controlled chuckle, and they moved deeper into the crowd. The entire cocktail hour unfolded in this exact pattern. Every 10 feet, another handshake, another introduction, another man whose eyes would flick to Vanessa. Heels, do the quick, silent calculation, and then return to Ryan with a look of shared, unspoken complicity. Heels. Some of the men in this room had attended Ryan's wedding. Quite a few of them knew his wife. Not one of them dared to speak her name. New York is a city that understands survival. Heels. And you don't survive by mentioning a man's wife when he's standing there with a 26-year-old in a dress the color of blood. By 10:15, they made their way into the grand ballroom. A vast, Heels, cavernous rectangle with a 42-foot ceiling and tiers of old private boxes, remnants of its history as an opera house. 70 tables were set for 10. A stage stood at the far end, fronted by a dance floor. Heels. 411 people had paid $12,500 each for the privilege of breathing this air tonight. Heels. And so we begin. We find Ryan at table 3, the best seat in the house. A seat he bought with a hefty donation to the Hartwell Foundation last April. He's playing the bar, pulling out Vanessa's chair with a practiced smoothness. Heels. But right across from him sits a real estate giant, Edmund Hose, already settled in with his third wife, and he doesn't even bother to stand. Ryan saw it. Oh, he absolutely saw it, and filed it away in that cold ledger he keeps in his mind. Heels. A bill that would come due for Edmund on Tuesday. Champagne? Vanessa's voice cuts through, her hand already reaching. Louis Rotary, he murmurs. Take it so slow. A laugh is her only answer. I don't do slow. You will tonight. Heels. He was on the verge of saying something truly cruel. You could feel the poison rising, but then the entire frequency of the room just shifted, and it didn't get quiet. That's the mistake people always make about rooms filled with power. Heels. It never goes completely silent. The sound just changes. The ambient hum of the room flattens. A laugh from across the way is cut short. You see a waiter pause, a tray of canapes held aloft, his purpose completely erased from his mind. Heels. And because the rest of the world stopped, Ryan looked up, and there she was, standing in the grand ballroom entrance. The one reserved for the most important arrivals. A woman who had stopped not by accident, but with intention. Heels. She stopped to give them all a moment to let the sight of her sink deep into their bones. Heels. The crystal of Ryan's glass makes a sharp sound against the table. Baby, Vanessa whispers, baby, what is it? And now her eyes are following his. The woman in the doorway is breathtaking, tall, poured into a dress of liquid platinum silk. Her hair, Heels, black as night, is pulled back severely, making the sharp, defiant line of her jaw the first thing you see. In her ears, 2 enormous pear-cut diamonds are the only jewels she wears. No necklace, no bracelets, not one ring. Her hands are completely bare. Heels. And just behind her, a man stands like a tailored shadow. Ryan doesn't know him, but it doesn't matter. He's lived in Manhattan long enough to recognize a man you do not look in the eye. Heels. He's tall, dressed in a black suit over a black shirt. A small silver pin on the lapel his only ornament. He has the face of a man who sleeps soundly no matter what he's done. The woman's gaze drifts across the room unhurried. It passes over 40 tables. Heels. It dismisses the governor's aide, a sitting senator, and a woman who owns the 7th largest art collection on the entire East Coast. She ignores Greg Moulton at the bar and Edmund Hose, who now looks like he's been turned to stone. And then, Heels. Her eyes find table 3. Ryan's mouth is just open, baby, Vanessa says again, her voice trembling. Who is that? Ryan says nothing. He can't form the words. The woman in platinum is his wife, and he has not seen her in 61 days. Heels. The last time, it was a Tuesday morning, their penthouse kitchen. She was wearing gray sweatpants and his old university t-shirt, clutching a coffee mug with both hands. Her hair was a wreck. She looked exhausted, beaten. He remembers thinking, Heels, she looks like someone who is losing. Ryan, she had said, I think we need to talk. Not now, Izzy. I have Singapore on the line at 9. When then? Tonight, after my dinner. I'll be home by 9. He never went home. Not that night. Heels. He was at Vanessa's on West 72nd Street. By the time he walked through his own door the next evening, Isabella was gone. Heels. A note sat on the marble countertop. Staying at the Arlen for a few days. I need space. He read it, folded it once, and dropped it into the trash. He actually thought, good. Finally. 61 days passed. He didn't call. She didn't call. Heels. He told the same story to his mother, his assistant, his lawyer. She just needs some time. We're figuring things out. Keep it out of the papers. But the woman walking toward him now, she is not small. She is not tired, and she is most certainly not his. Feels. She moves through the silent room, and no one dares to get in her way. A few people whisper her name, Isabella, as if they're seeing a specter. She gives no sign she hears them. Feels. She moves with the absolute certainty of someone who has already played this entire night out in her head, move for move. The man in the black shirt is with her, not a step behind, not a step ahead, perfectly in sync. Just off her left shoulder, Feels. He walks with the unnerving grace of a predator. No wasted motion. She reaches table 3. She does not take a seat. Her voice is perfectly level, and that is the thing that shatters him. In the fleeting second he had to prepare, Feels. He was ready for screaming, for tears, for a public collapse. He was in no way prepared for this lethal calm. Izzy. He stands so fast his napkin slides to the floor. Feels. Izzy, I had no idea you were coming. She simply cocks her head. No, of course you didn't. Vanessa is on her feet now, and she makes a fatal error. She touches Ryan's arm. 3 different tables saw it. Isabella's gaze lowers to that hand, Feels, lingers for a fraction of a second, then snaps right back to Ryan's face. Aren't you going to introduce me, Ryan? Izzy, don't. We can talk somewhere else. We're not going anywhere. Introduce me, Feels. The pocket of silence that had formed around their table began to expand. Table 2 fell quiet, then table 5, then 11. The polished dance floor suddenly felt like a spotlight, and they were trapped in its beam. And swallows hard, Feels. This is Vanessa. Vanessa Cole. She's your girlfriend. Isabella finishes the sentence for him. It's fine, Ryan. It's just a word. We're all adults here. Isabella then turns her gaze on Vanessa, truly seeing her for the first time. It's a slow, Feels, methodical appraisal from the red soles of her shoes up the red dress to the perfectly painted red lips. Vanessa. Hi, Vanessa manages, attempting a smile that dies on her face. How long? I'm sorry? How long? Isabella repeats. Feels. Have you been with my husband? Vanessa's eyes flick to Ryan, the man who was supposed to have handled all of this months ago. But he's just staring at Isabella's earrings. Lost. A year, Vanessa whispers. Feels. Her voice is so much smaller than she intended. A year? Isabella nods, as if confirming a data point in a report. Tracks with what? Ryan snaps back to life. Isabella turns her head slowly. Her eyes lock with his. Feels. With the other 3. A bomb detonated in the silence. The man in the black suit hadn't so much as twitched. He didn't need to. His stillness was a presence, a physical weight in the air more threatening than any movement. Ryan finally looks at him. Feels. Really looks. Who Ryan demands is that, and Isabella says, that is my husband. For a moment, Ryan is certain he's misheard. Feels. He actually leans forward like he's trying to catch a whispered dinner order. What? My husband. Isabella says again, no change in her tone. Luca, this is Ryan Caldwell. Ryan, meet Luca DeSantis. The man in black inclines his head. Feels. A barely perceptible motion. He doesn't extend a hand. His eyes do something that isn't a smile, but it carries a chilling amusement. Mr. Caldwell, he says. The voice is low and deep, and the way he says the name makes it sound like an illness. I'm sorry, Feels. Ryan looks from one to the other, completely adrift. Izzy, I don't understand. You're confused. We're married, Izzy. We are married. No. Feels. What do you mean, no? No, we are not. Isabella's voice is the same flat line it was when she first spoke his name. We have not been married since November 14th. The decree was finalized. It was uncontested. Uncontested? Feels. I never saw. You were served, Ryan. I was never served. You were served at your office on August 22nd at 2:40 in the afternoon by a process server named Rosa Delgado. You signed for the envelope. Feels. You put it in your bottom right desk drawer and went to a meeting. You never opened it. The color drains from Ryan's face, leaving it as white as the linen. You didn't read it? I know. Feels. That was a risk I was willing to take. My attorney, he predicted it. He said, a man like that will see it as an annoyance. He'll put it aside and forget it. And he was correct. You never filed a response. So after 90 days, Feels, the court proceeded without you. The decree was issued on November 14th. My copy arrived on the 16th. And yours? She glances at a delicate gold watch on her wrist. Yours was delivered by courier about 4 hours ago. To your office. Feels. The office you weren't at today because you were preparing for this little party. So it's sitting on your desk. Unopened. Again. The quiet around table 3 has now consumed the entire ballroom. Feels. 411 souls are all pretending not to listen, and all of them are failing. Izzy, you don't call me that. Isabella, you don't get to call me that either. Then what am I supposed to? You are not supposed to call me anything at all. Feels. Ryan, you will no longer have the need. And poor Vanessa is finally connecting the dots. You can watch it happen on her face. The slow tide of horror as she replays the last 18 months feels. Realizing the film she thought she was starring in was an entirely different story. Wait, she says. Wait. Ryan, you told me the divorce wasn't. You said you hadn't even filed. You said she was, Van. Shut up. Don't you tell me to shut up, feels. You shut up, Vanessa, feels. Isabella watched them, her expression as placid as a hunter observing prey caught in a snare. Miss Cole, Vanessa's head snapped toward her. Yes? Has he gotten you a condominium yet? What? A residence. Has he purchased one for you? He usually does. Feels. Around the 14-month mark. The last one received a 2-bedroom in Tribeca. The one before that, a loft in Chelsea. I'm just keeping on track of the pattern. Vanessa's mouth opened and closed, soundlessly. No, he said we would after his divorce. Feels. The divorce that's already final, you mean? Vanessa's eyes seemed to lose their focus. I didn't know. Of course you didn't, sweetie. It's not your fault. He's very, very good at this part of the deception. He's had a great deal of practice. Feels. Don't call me sweetie. And for the very first time that evening, Isabella allowed herself a smile. Feels. It began with a tiny smile that never touched her eyes, and it was the most terrifying thing the surrounding tables had ever witnessed on a woman in that ballroom. No, she breathed. You're not, are you? A gamble. Ryan finally found his words, feels, but they came out a full octave too loud, a beginner's mistake. And just like that, everyone who had been pretending not to listen now had a reason to turn and stare. This is a scene, Isabella. You're making a fool of yourself. And me, feels. In front of, do you have any idea who these people are? Do you understand what you're... I know precisely who is in this room, Ryan. I chose it. You chose it? I had another venue, the Pierre, booked last October, feels. But then I heard you were bringing the Hartwell account here, so I made a change, feels. She gave a little shrug, the silk of her dress rippling like dark water. I wanted an audience with a long memory. You're insane. I'm thorough. You can't just... Isabella, whatever you think you've found, feels. Whatever high-priced lawyer you hired. Pritchard Hayes. For a single terrifying moment, Ryan literally forgot how to breathe. Pritchard Hayes was the firm he'd used for his second divorce. They terminated you as a client in June, feels. Isabella said, her tone utterly conversational. They probably neglected to tell you. They didn't have to. You weren't on a live retainer. This is, he was completely unraveling. You could see the desperation in his eyes, feels. He spun on the nearest target, the man in the black shirt. And who the hell are you? You just stroll into a room I booked, feels. You stand beside her, and you imagine you're going to. Luca Diantis hadn't moved a muscle this entire time. He just remained a step behind Isabella's shoulder, his hands loose at his sides, his expression a perfect blank. But now, feels. He tilted his chin a fraction, his gaze falling on Ryan as if he were merely observing Caldwell. What? I will not be laying a hand on you tonight. Oh, you're not, are you? No. A beat passed. Tonight belongs entirely to her, feels. That single word, tonight, seemed to linger in the air, heavy and sharp. And in that one moment, every man at the 3 nearest tables quietly reevaluated their plans for Monday morning. Pam, it was Edmund Hose, of all people, who broke first, feels. He'd been sitting at table 3, frozen beside his wife. But somewhere in the last 90 seconds, a circuit in his mind had tripped, and he'd decided he wasn't sinking with Ryan Caldwell's ship. His chair scraped against the floor as he stood, feels. The man was 68, and he'd known Isabella's father for 31 of those years, a detail he'd never advertised. Isabella. Edmund. I had no idea, was unaware. Let the record show. I was not aware. I know you weren't, Edmund. It's all right, feels. Your father, does he know? He sends his regards. Edmund just gave a single sharp nod and sat back down. His wife, who only caught the word father and somehow understood nothing and everything all at once, reached for her glass of wine. Feels. Ryan watched all of this unfold, a cold sickness climbing its way up his spine. Her father, he echoed. Very guards. He does, Isabella confirmed. Her father's an accountant from Rye. No, feels. Her father is Michael Vale. He's a CPA. He lives in. My father's name, Isabella stated, her voice devoid of all emotion, is Marco Varelli. Ryan's face did something Vanessa had never seen before. It simply emptied out, not anger, feels. Not shock, just nothing, like a television screen after the power cord's been ripped from the wall. Yes, Ryan, Varelli. Yes, at 3 separate tables, feels. Men who'd been feigning interest in their wives' anecdotes dropped the pretense entirely and turned to watch the final act. Isabella surveyed the room again, slow and deliberate, just as she had when she first entered. Heels. But the look was different now, like she was taking inventory. She was noting who was present, who would be whispering on Monday, who would carry this story with them to countless dinner parties. She turned her attention back to Ryan. Heels. I'm not going to hit you, she said. I'm not going to throw a drink on your mistress. I am not going to cause a scene, Ryan, because I don't need to. The scene is already here. You created it. Heels. You created it a year and 8 months ago in a hotel in San Francisco with a woman named Marissa Kent. Then you did it again 6 months later with Alicia Park, and again last spring with some girl whose name I never bothered to learn, because by that point, Heels, I had stopped caring what you called them. You built the scene, Ryan. Heels. She waved a hand, a small, elegant gesture encompassing the 400 people pretending not to watch, turned on the lights. Isabella, I'm leaving. Wait, I have one more thing to say to you before I go. He waited. Heels. The man looked as if he'd forgotten how to do anything else. I loved you, she said. Her voice was just a whisper. Vanessa had to lean in to hear it, and she despised herself for doing so. I know you don't believe that, Heels, because you don't believe anyone truly loves anyone. You believe people just manage one another, but I did. For a very long time. Far past the moment I should have walked away. Heels. I concealed who I was from you because I never wanted my family to be the reason you chose me. Heels. I wanted you to choose me, just me, the me who made you pasta on Sundays, who read beside you in bed and asked you about your day. She paused. You didn't choose her, Ryan. You never even saw her. Ryan's mouth was just a slack, empty space. Heels. No sound came out. So I'm taking her back, she turned. She didn't spare Vanessa another look. There was no need. Luca DeAntis offered his arm. She took it. The way her hand settled on his sleeve wasn't desperate or shaky. Heels. It was the hand of a woman who had been doing this her entire life, an action as natural as breathing. They walked out the same way she had come in. It took her 22 seconds to cross the floor. Heels. And every single one of her steps reverberated in a silence so profound you could hear the click of her heels on the marble. At one table, a woman exhaled a sound that was nearly a sob. At another, a man muttered, Jesus Christ, Heels, and his wife remained completely still. At the doors, Isabella paused. She glanced over her shoulder just enough to table 3. Ryan was still standing there. Vanessa was slowly collapsing into her chair, as if her own bones had betrayed her. Heels. Her red dress seemed garish in the light now. Suddenly cheap, a costume. Isabella looked at her husband, her ex-husband, her former husband, the man whose name she had worn for 7 years and would not for 7 more minutes. Heels. And she didn't offer a smile, nor a frown. She simply looked at him the way you might look at an old piece of furniture you're abandoning in a move because it isn't worth the effort to take. Then she turned, Heels, and she and Luca DeAntis strode from the Monteverde Hotel's ballroom into the long white corridor. But the moment the door swung shut, the room did not erupt. That's another thing people misunderstand about places like this. They don't explode, Heels. They whisper. 411 people began to speak, all very quietly, not to each other, not at first, into their phones, under their breath, behind cupped hands. By 11 o'clock, the story would hit 3 major group chats. Heels. By midnight, it would be on a private email chain sent to 17 top-tier hedge fund managers. By Monday morning, Caldwell Holdings stock would open down 4.25%. By Monday afternoon, it would be down 9%. And by Wednesday, Heels, the board of Caldwell Holdings would call a meeting to which Ryan Caldwell was very specifically not invited. But that was all later. At table 3, in that first minute after the doors closed, Heels, Vanessa Cole turned to the man she'd followed here and whispered, "You told me she was a nobody." Ryan Caldwell didn't reply. He was just gazing at the doors. He was trying to recall Isabella's face from their wedding day. Heels. He couldn't. He remembered the dress. He remembered the church. He could even remember the taste of the cake. But her face was a complete blank. Ryan, what? Who is Marco Varelli? Ryan turned to her, his motions heavy and slow. Vanessa, he said. Heels. Get your coat. What? Get your coat. We are leaving now. Ryan, who is? Get your coat. She got her coat. In the long white hallway outside, Isabella Varelli walked with her hand on Luca DeSantis's arm, saying nothing at all. Heels. The corridor was 120 feet long and utterly deserted, save for a single waiter who saw them approaching, slipped into an alcove, and became intensely preoccupied with adjusting a stack of glasses. Heels. Matteo was already at the elevator, holding the door. They stepped inside. Matteo pressed the button for the lobby. The doors slid closed. In the perfect silence of the descent, Luca looked down at her. You all right? She had to consider it for a moment. Heels. Yeah. You sure? I'm sure. He studied her a second longer. Your hand is shaking. She glanced down. Her hand on his arm was trembling. Just slightly. She hadn't even noticed. Oh, she said. He covered her hand with his. His was warm and solid as a rock. Heels. It's okay, he said quietly. It can shake. It's allowed to. She finally released a breath she'd been holding since she'd walked out of the Arlen suite an hour and 40 minutes ago. It wasn't a sob. Heels. And it wasn't a laugh. No. It was the sound of a woman setting down a weight she had been carrying for 61 consecutive days. Luca, thank you for being here. He gave her a look that was almost a smile, but not quite. Isabella, he said, his voice low. Heels. I was coming whether you asked me to or not. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby. Snow was falling hard outside the huge glass doors of the Monte Verde, flakes as big as quarters against the black canvas of the Park Avenue night. Matteo went first. Heels. They followed him. Back up on the 18th floor, in a room filled with every powerful person in New York, Ryan Caldwell was fleeing his own party. A woman on his arm he no longer wanted, walking past tables of people who would never take his call again. Heels. He was on his way to a car, a ride home to a quiet penthouse where a cream-colored envelope lay unopened on his kitchen counter. Inside of it, a divorce decree. It was dated 2 months ago, bearing a signature that he knew with absolute certainty, Heels, wasn't his own. You see, he didn't lose his wife tonight. He'd lost her somewhere back in August. He was only just now reading the eulogy. The town car waiting by the Monte Verde's side entrance pulled away at exactly 10:48. Heels. And Isabella Varelli, she never glanced back. She didn't need to. She knew what was unfolding in that room, the way a person who strikes a match knows the inevitable nature of a flame. Across from her sat Luca, cool and contained. Heels. One ankle resting on his knee, his gaze on her, but never so obviously as to be caught. Heels. Matteo was up front, behind the raised partition. The snow was falling heavier now, painting Park Avenue in the stark tones of an old black-and-white photograph. Do you want to go home? Luca asked. Heels. It wasn't a question so much as the sound of a door being held open for her. Not yet. No, I want a drink, a real one, not that celebratory champagne. A small, exhausted laugh escaped her as she pressed a hand to her cheek. Her skin was on fire. Heels. Hadn't even realized it. I've been drinking Pelgro for 6 straight weeks. I am so tired of Pelgro. The Carlisle is still open. Not the Carlisle. I want somewhere empty, somewhere without a soul. Luca seemed to chew on that for a moment. Heels. He leaned forward, rapping his knuckles once on the partition. Glass slid down. The apartment on 63rd. Yes, sir. Use the back entrance. Yes, sir. The glass hummed back into place. The car hooked a sharp left onto 64th. Heels. Crossing Madison, gliding east through the falling, silent snow. Isabella watched the buildings blur past her window, but she wasn't seeing any of them. She was doing what she does. Cataloging. Filing away the details now that the performance was over. Heels. Ryan's expression when she let the name Varelli fall from her lips. Vanessa's face when she noted the pattern was consistent with the other 3. Edmund Ho's actually rising from his chair. She hadn't expected that. Heels. She would send his wife flowers on Monday. You're working. Luca's voice cut through her thoughts. I'm always working. You don't have to work tonight. Heels. I know. He didn't push. It was one of the very first things she'd learned about him in the 4 months since they'd met. He never forced an issue. He just opened a space and waited. And the space he created was immense. Heels. Far larger than most people could manage. And things just had a tendency to rush in and fill the void. The car slipped into an unmarked underground garage on 63rd. A man in a black coat just nodded at the driver, not even bothering to glance inside. Heels. Another guard waved them past a steel gate. The garage was small, holding only 4 cars, none of them ostentatious. Luca stepped out first, offering her his hand. She took it, emerging in her platinum silk dress as if shedding an old skin. Heels. And followed him toward a private elevator tucked in the back. The elevator had no buttons at all. Heels. Just a small brass panel with a single waiting keyhole. Luca slid a key into the lock, turned it, and the lift began its silent ascent. How many floors? She asked, a sudden need to fill the quiet space between them. 4? Only 4? Heels. It's a small building. You own it? And she answered her own question. Yes, of course you do. The doors parted, opening into a foyer that flowed directly into a long room. Soft light, dark wood, Heels. and a fireplace that had clearly been lit 15 minutes before their arrival, timed to perfection. At the far end, a housekeeper in the kitchen gave Luca a single, silent nod before disappearing through a swinging door. Heels, before Isabella's heels had even touched the rug. "Sit," Luca said. Heels. "What would you like to drink? How do you take it? Neat." "Whatever is closest." He crossed to a sideboard and poured. She sank into the long sofa, kicking off her heels. She'd been standing in those things for 6 hours. Heels. Her feet seemed to breathe a sigh of relief against the thick rug. She tucked them beneath her, a gesture that had nothing to do with the designer gown, and everything to do with being 33 and tired down to the bone. Heels. He handed her the glass and took the chair across from her. He had his own now, something dark in a short tumbler, but he made no move to drink it. "Well," Isabella said, "that's over. That part, at least. There are always other parts, aren't there?" Heels. She took a deep swallow of the whiskey, feeling its burn trail all the way down. Heels. She had orchestrated every single detail. The dress, the earrings, the lawyer, the filing date, the venue, the precise placement of the car at the side entrance, but she had never allowed herself to imagine the moment after. And now it was here. A couch, Heels, a glass of whiskey, and a man in a black shirt watching her across a fire, asking if she was all right without ever speaking a word. He didn't recognize me. Luca simply tilted his head. "When I walked in," she clarified, "for the first 3 seconds, Heels, he had absolutely no idea who I was. Isn't that funny?" "No, it's not funny. I don't know why I said it was." She was staring into the flames now. He looked right through me, Heels, like I was just another woman in the room he hadn't managed to get into bed yet. "Isabella, I'm fine." "I didn't ask." Heels. "You were about to." "I wasn't." She looked at him then. His expression was impossible to read, a perfect mask, but his eyes were fixed on her, steady. They hadn't left her once since she'd sat down. "You are a strange man," she said. "I've been told." Heels. "I'm saying it as a compliment. I took it as one." She laughed, that same brittle, tired sound, and took another drink of whiskey. And for the first time since she'd walked into the Arlen 3 hours ago, a knot deep in her chest finally began to unwind. Heels. She had met Luca Dantas in September, in a room at her father's house in Westchester, a room she had not set foot in for 11 years. She didn't want to go. She argued against it for 3 days. Her mother called twice, Heels. Then her father called himself, a true rarity, and used that meant, "This is not a request. Isabella, come home. I need to see your face." Heels. So she drove up on a Sunday afternoon. She walked into that long dining room, the one with the dark wooden beams and the oil painting of Lake Como, and there he was. Her father, at the head of the table, her mother on his right, and on his left, Heels, a man she had never seen before in her life. This man got to his feet the moment she entered. That was the first thing, and it wasn't some empty, polite gesture. He stood as if he had truly registered that a woman had come into the room. "Isabella." Heels. "This is Luca, my daughter." She looked at her father. He gave her the look that meant, "We are not discussing this now." "Papa, sit." Heels. "Kara, eat." So she sat, and she ate. Through the first course, Luca DeSantis said almost nothing. During the second, he inquired about a small gallery she held a stake in down in Chelsea, and he asked about it as if he genuinely knew the place. Heels. By the third course, she was no longer pretending not to be in a conversation with him. After dinner, her father walked her to the door himself. Another thing that never happened. Heels. He took both of her hands in his and switched to Italian, the language he reserved for things that truly mattered. "He knows about your husband. He knows everything. He knew for 11 weeks before I did. He came to me." Heels. "He asked for my permission to help you. I granted it." Heels. She could only stare at him. "Papa, he is a good man, Bella. Not a soft man, but a good one. I would not have him in my house otherwise. I don't need. I know what you need, and what you do not. I am giving you an option, not an order. You are my daughter." Heels. "You will always make your own choice." He squeezed her hands hard. "But do not punish yourself with solitude. Not with this man. This one is ugly, and he is cruel, and you deserve to have someone at your shoulder." Heels. She drove back to the Arlen that night and didn't sleep at all. She just sat by the window, watching the lights around the reservoir in Central Park blink on and off and on again. Heels. And at 4 in the morning, she took out her phone and typed a message to a number Luca had given her, on a business card that had had no name, a single line. "What do you want from me, Mr. Dantas?" He replied in less than 2 minutes, which shocked her. Heels. "Nothing you do not wish to give. I would like to help you see this through. I would like to buy you coffee tomorrow, somewhere public, and explain what I can do." If you say no, the answer is no, and you will never hear from me again. She met him the next day. Heels. A place on Lexington. The coffee was terrible, but the windows were large. He told her precisely what he was capable of, and she listened. Heels. She had already fired 3 questions at him, and he had taken each one without flinching. Even the one about whether he'd ever killed a man, to which he answered, yeah, twice. Both times in Palermo, both men who had it coming. Heels. And I'm not explaining it unless you force me to. She told him not to, not yet. That was the beginning. Now 5 months later, in some apartment on 63rd Street she had hardly ever seen, she set her drink down, looked at the man her father had sent, Heels, and asked, Luca, are we actually married? He raised an eyebrow, the barest of movements. Heels. You know we are. We signed documents. We did a great deal more than that in a cathedral, in a small town in Calabria, with 4 people as our witnesses. Yes, but was any of it real? He fell silent for a long moment, slowly turning his glass in his hand. Heels. Isabella, the paperwork is real. The cathedral is real. The witnesses are, too. But if you are asking about it in that other sense, that's a question that only you can answer, not me. That's a politician's answer. No, Heels. A politician makes it sound like both yes and no. That was just the truth. She held his gaze. Do you love me? The question escaped before she could stop it, leaving her feeling utterly exposed, wanting to snatch the words back from the air. But she didn't. Heels. He never looked away. Heels. I don't have that answer, he said. What I do have is this. I came to this country for you, no hesitation. I know that since September, thinking about any other woman has been impossible. I know that when I saw you walk into that room tonight, Heels, I forgot how to draw a breath, if that's what you mean by love. I can't say for sure. Not tonight, maybe in 6 months, maybe a year from now. But I can tell you this much. I am not going anywhere while you find out. She just watched him for a long, Heels, quiet moment. Then she picked up her whiskey, threw it back, and rose to her feet, barefoot in a silk gown. She moved around the table, perched on the arm of his chair, and laid a hand on his neck. But she didn't close the distance. Not just yet. Heels. Instead, she simply rested her forehead on his temple. Her eyes closing, she breathed out. Okay, he echoed. And they stayed like that, frozen in a moment, as snow drifted past the huge apartment windows on 63rd Street. At the same time, Heels, 40 blocks to the south, at the corner of 58th and Park, a valet at the Monte Verde Hotel was desperately trying to pacify a very angry man in a tuxedo, explaining why his car would be another 11 minutes. Heels. Ryan Caldwell was seething under the hotel awning in 18-degree air, jacket open, his breath coming out in furious white plumes. He didn't feel the cold, not at all. Vanessa stood near him, wrapped in her red dress and fur, Heels, shivering with her arms crossed. She wasn't speaking. Every time she tried in the last 9 minutes, he'd told her to just be quiet. Vanessa, I'm thinking. Heels. Your car is 11 minutes away, Mr. Caldwell, the valet repeated for the 3rd time. You said 7 minutes, and that was 4 minutes ago. Yes, sir, the garage. There's a backup on Park because of the snow. My apologies, sir. Ryan offered no reply. Heels, his eyes locked on his phone. He had woken it up 9 times in the last 4 minutes, opened his email, closed it, opened it once more. He began a message to someone named Greg Moulton, typing, Greg, I have to talk to you tonight, and then he erased it. Why? Heels. Because not 20 minutes ago, he had watched Greg Moulton himself stride right past him through the lobby, hail a cab, and pointedly refuse to meet his eyes. Heels. Greg Moulton, the man who was best man to his first wedding. Ryan, be quiet, Vanessa. Ryan, I'm so cold. Go back inside then. I can't go in there again, are you? Then stand there and shut your mouth. She just stared at the side of his head, Heels, but he refused to look at her. A moment later, tears filled her eyes and she swiped at her cheek with the back of her hand, smudging her red lipstick in a smear. For the first time all night, she looked exactly like what she was. Heels, a 26-year-old from Ohio who had gambled on all the wrong things. You told me, she choked out, her voice breaking. You told me she was nobody, just a housewife, that her father was some accountant. He is an accountant. She said his name, Heels. I heard what she said to you. Vanessa, then who is she, Ryan? Who have I been sleeping with? At that, Ryan finally turned to face her. Heels. In the stark white light of the canopy, his face seemed transformed. His mouth was thin, his eyes narrowed. He looked, Vanessa realized, with a sickening dread, like a man a full dozen years older than the one she thought she knew. I have no idea who she is, Heels, he stated. I was married to her for 7 years, and I have absolutely no clue who that woman is. The car finally arrived. He got in without a thought of holding the door for her. She had to open it for herself, feels, her bare hand struggling with the cold handle before she tumbled in beside him, a heap of red silk and fur. The driver merged into traffic. For 31 blocks, neither of them said a thing, feels. The car pulled up in front of his building on Central Park West, but Ryan made no move to get out. Baby? Vanessa ventured, her voice unsteady. She'd been experimenting with tones for the last 20 minutes, feels, searching for one that might actually reach him. Do you want me? Should I come up? No, Ryan, just go home. What did you say, Vanessa? Go home. Give the driver your address and he'll take you. Ryan, please don't do this. Not tonight, feels. Vanessa. He turned his head slowly, his eyes were utterly vacant. No anger, no affection, nothing at all. Go home. She stared at him for a long beat. Then her entire expression hardened, feels, and she spoke in a voice that was a universe away from the one she'd used for the past year and a half. Feels. You son of a Ryan. Yeah, you son of a Ryan. I know. He stepped out of the car, closed the door, and the vehicle pulled away, leaving Vanessa Cole in the back seat, a ruin in a red dress with ruined lipstick. Feels. Ryan walked into his building's lobby and never once glanced back. The doorman, a man named Hector who'd been there for 22 years, a man who had seen Ryan return drunk, furious, elated, feels, and with 3 different women, saw the look on his face and knew not to even wish him a good evening. Upstairs in the penthouse, Ryan let his keys fall into the ceramic bowl. He just stood in the entryway, his coat still on, feels. The apartment was pitch black, save for a single lamp in the living room running on a timer. It was also, he began to realize, clean. It had not been clean 2 days ago. It had not been clean for weeks, feels. He'd dismissed the housekeeper back in October over some trivial thing and simply never got around to hiring a new one. Isabella had always managed those things. He kept meaning to, but he never did. The whole place had been collecting a layer of filth, feels. A ring of condensation he'd been using as a coaster had been on the coffee table. The ring was gone. The table by the door was polished. The carpets were vacuumed, and the air, it had the faint scent of lemon and something else, feels. Something that smelled like her, feels. And there it was. Sitting on the long glass dining table was a thick envelope, the color of cream. He walked toward it. He knew with a cold certainty what he would find inside. He knew because a small, feels, dark corner of his mind had known it the instant she said November 14th in that ballroom. He knew it even more when she mentioned Pritchard Hayes, and he knew it as an absolute fact when she dropped the name Varelli, feels. The entire 39-block drive had been nothing more than his own mind desperately trying to deny the inevitable truth. He sat at the table. He took off his coat. He placed it on the chair beside him like a man unaccustomed to fancy events, feels. He opened inside were 3 items, feels. The first was the divorce decree. Finalized in the county of New York on November 14th of the previous year, it was uncontested, signed by a Judge Ellison. His name was on the document. Her name was on the document. His signature was not, feels, because he had never signed anything. But that didn't matter, the decree explained, because he had been properly served and failed to respond within the mandated 90 days. It had a timestamp, a raised seal. It was, feels, in the most mundane and legally binding way imaginable, real. The second item was a letter typed on Pritchard Hayes LP letterhead. It was addressed to him, Ryan P. Caldwell, Esquire. 1 short paragraph. It stated that as of the date on the decree, feels, the firm was now representing, feels, Isabella Varelli, concerning all matters related to the dissolution of their marriage. All future correspondence was to be directed to a Ms. Helena Brandt, counsel of record. It included a phone number and an email address, feels. It was signed by a woman he had met one time at a Christmas party back in 2019, to whom he had told a joke that she absolutely did not find funny. The third thing was a note handwritten. Cream-colored paper, black ink, her script, feels. He knew that handwriting from 7 years of birthday cards. Ryan, the apartment is in my name. It always has been. My father purchased it in 2017 as a wedding present and placed it in a trust that you were never a party to, feels. You have until the end of February to remove your belongings. After that date, we will have it moved for you, placed in storage, and you will receive the invoice. That Audi? It's registered to you. The house in East Hampton is yours. The boat, too. Bro, feels. Anything in your name is still yours. You'll find I haven't taken a single thing that wasn't already mine. And no, I didn't take the photos. They're still in the guest bathroom drawer, right where I left them in August. Do with them as you please, feels. Don't call me. Ryan read the note. Then he read it again, He let it fall to the glass table and just stared at the opposite wall for what felt like an eternity. Feels. On that wall hung some painting he'd bought at an auction in 2018 because his interior designer promised it would be a smart investment. Feels. He had no memory of the artist's name, couldn't recall what he'd paid for it. He had no clue what the painting was even supposed to depict. But looking at it now, he finally understood what it was. Feels. A ridiculously overpriced sheet of wallpaper he'd acquired to make some woman he didn't even really think he was a sophisticated man. He stood. He walked to the guest bathroom on the far side of the apartment, pulled open the drawer beneath the sink, Feels, and there it was, the envelope she'd written about. Plain manila, unmarked. He brought it back to the dining table, sat down and tore it open. The photos were 8 by 10s. Feels. There were 43 of them. 43. He soon realized they'd been taken over a period of 16 months by 3 different private investigators. The quality was flawless, crystal clear, perfectly framed. They showed him with Vanessa Feels. They showed him with Marissa Kent. They showed him with Alicia Park, whose name Isabella always refused to learn. Sophie. That was it. The photo right on top was of him, Feels, kissing Vanessa in her doorway on West 72nd Street on a Tuesday morning last March. He just sat there, looking down at the mountain of proof for what must have been 10, maybe 15 minutes. He didn't move them. He didn't try to hide them, Feels. He just stared at the stack and waited for any kind of feeling to finally arrive, Feels. But there was no guilt, and that emptiness, that specific void where guilt was supposed to be, was the thing that finally made him shut his eyes. This man simply wasn't wired for it. He'd tried to summon the feeling before, Feels, out of a kind of morbid curiosity, but it never took. His whole life felt like a film, projected on a screen just in front of him, something to be watched, not lived. What he felt now was something else entirely. It was the raw, Feels, staggering shock of being demolished in a fight he never realized he was in. He pushed himself away from the table. He walked through his own apartment, which was, of course, never his apartment, and made his way to the bedroom, Feels. The bedroom was a vast square on the south side of the penthouse, with a view of the park that could break your heart, and the bed was perfectly made. He couldn't remember the last time he'd entered this room and found the bed made, Feels, not unless money had changed hands to make it so. And there was something on the pillow. He moved closer. It was her wedding ring. She had left it right in the center of his pillow, Feels, resting on a cream silk pillowcase she'd picked up in Florence sometime in 2019. The ring itself was a platinum band holding a 4-carat diamond. He'd barely paid for any of it. Her father had paid for it, Feels. And it was just then beginning to dawn on him that her dad had probably paid for almost everything he believed he'd earned himself, Feels. He picked up the ring. It was ice cold. He held it between his thumb and forefinger, rotating it in the dim lamplight. He tried to remember sliding it onto her finger. He could picture the church, the priest, the sound of the organ. But her face? Feels. It was a blank space. And then out of nowhere, it slammed into him. He could see her, 26 years old, looking up at him at the altar, her veil already thrown back, her eyes wet. Not from sadness, but from a kind of breathless disbelief in her own luck, Feels. And she actually mouthed the words to him. She mouthed, "I can't believe it's you," Feels. He sat down hard on the edge of the bed, a man in a foolish rented tuxedo and polished shoes, wearing his grandfather's gold watch. He dropped his face into his hands, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Feels, Ryan Caldwell made a sound that wasn't calculated. The man was 41 years old, the CEO of a company with a $1.4 billion market cap. He had 29 suits in a closet 10 feet from where he sat, Feels. And he was sobbing into his palms in an apartment that wasn't his, on a bed that wasn't his, over a wife who was never really his. He would have given every last dollar, every single share, just to go back to that kitchen 2 months ago and say, "Yeah, Izzy, Feels, right now. Let's talk, Feels." But you don't get to go back. No one ever gets to go back to the kitchen. Meanwhile, 40 blocks north, Isabella was asleep on a couch. She hadn't planned to be. The idea was some whiskey, a conversation with this man, Luca, and then her driver, Matteo, Feels, would take her to the Arlen Hotel. But somewhere around midnight, her head came to rest on Luca's shoulder. Around 12:20, her eyes drifted shut. After that, her breathing deepened. Luca didn't move, not a single muscle. He just sat there, Feels, letting her lean against him, his own drink long forgotten, watching the fire die, terrified of waking her. At 12:40, the housekeeper slipped into the room. left a folded cashmere blanket on the arm of the couch without a sound, and then was gone. Heels. He gently draped the blanket over her. She didn't stir. Her face resting there against him was completely unguarded for the first time since he'd known her. No plots, no strategy, no holding back. She looked 22. Heels. Her phone buzzed on the table beside them. He reached for it, so carefully, meaning only to silence it, but he saw the name on the screen before he could look away. Papa. He stared at the name for a long second. Heels. Then he did something he never does. He answered someone else's phone. Don Marco. A beat of silence from the other end. Luca, she is sleeping. Good. How is she? She's fine. She did it just as she said she would. I never doubted her. Heels. She'll be exhausted tomorrow. Tell her to stay in the city. Heels. Tell her not to drive up before Wednesday. Her mother is coming on Monday with soup. Tell her.
Tell her.
Don Marco Varley was 69 years old with a voice that sounded like a broken cello. He used that voice with immense precision, Heels, the way old men who are used to absolute obedience always do. Luca. Yes, Don Marco, you didn't need to call me after. I wasn't expecting it, but I appreciate it. I didn't call you. You called her. The outcome is the same. Yes, Heels. You stood behind her tonight. One step to there. I will. Luca. Luca. Yes, if he comes near her. Luca's eyes flickered down to the top of Isabella's head, and his entire expression turned to stone. He will not, Don Marco. Heels. If he comes near her, Luca, quietly. Quietly. Good. Buona notte. Buona notte. The line went dead. Luca placed the phone back on the table, screen down. Heels. He pulled the blanket a little higher on Isabella's shoulder and did not move. In a cab on the West Side Highway, Vanessa Colt was consumed by her phone. The orange glow of the streetlights flashed across her face. Heels. Her fur coat was sliding from her shoulder. Her lipstick was a lost cause. She was doom-scrolling. The first group chat had ignited at 11:04. 4 people. One of them was a woman named Tisha from the auction house where Vanessa worked part-time. Heels. And Tisha had typed with the kind of frantic energy that suggested she'd been waiting years for this exact night. Girl, you need to see this. Tisha sent screenshots. Heels. They were from a private Twitter account with 48,000 followers that trafficked in the drama of New York's elite. The account had dropped 3 bombs in the last 40 minutes. The first. Heels. Did Ryan Caldwell's wife just walk into the Hartwell Gala on the arm of Luca DeSantis? The second, confirming from 2 sources on the ground at the Monteverde tonight. Decree was filed in August. Divorce was finalized in November. He did not know. Heels. He is apparently still at the gala. Heels. The third one read, Everyone's asking, and yes, she is that Varley. Her father is Marco Varley of the Westchester Varless. I am not making this up. The quiet wife was a Varley the whole time. Send help, my jaw is on the floor. Heels. Beneath that third tweet were 711 replies, a number that was climbing with each passing second. Most were just some form of, oh my God. A handful were along the lines of good for her. One, Heels, from an account with 50,000 followers of its own, simply said Rip Caldwell Holdings Monday morning. But none of them mentioned Vanessa. She scrolled and scrolled, hunting for her own name, dreading it and needing to see it at the same time. Heels. And get this, her name was nowhere. Not a single time. Not in the replies, not in any tweet. She was in that ballroom for almost an hour. She had been on Ryan Caldwell's arm for 11 months. She was photographed by 3 paparazzi on her way in, Heels, and at least 2 on her way out. But in the story that was now exploding, the story that was going to own the entire weekend, she didn't exist. A footnote. The best she got was the woman in the red dress, Heels, and that came from a single tweet with only 16 likes. She wasn't replaced. She was deleted. The cab stopped at her building on West 72nd, and for a long moment she just sat there, completely still. The driver, a patient man, waited. Ma'am, Heels, he said, we're here. Heels. Right. I know. She gets out, walks up the steps. Her doorman, Tomas, this young kid who'd only had the job for 2 months and usually gave her a huge, awkward hello, just took one look at her face and said nothing at all. In the elevator, Heels, she saw her reflection in the brass siding. The red dress, the smeared lipstick, the mascara that had run, then dried, then run again. She looked, she realized, Heels, exactly like a woman who had just been thrown out of a property, which was more or less what had happened. She reached her apartment, a 1-bedroom on the 9th floor that Ryan had been paying for since April. Heels. And that, she suddenly knew with a cold, sharp certainty, was an expense that would stop being covered on the 1st of the month. She slammed the door, kicked the red shoes off. She marched into her kitchen, and she opened the freezer. Feels. She pulls out a bottle of vodka Ryan left 4 months ago and doesn't bother with a glass. Her phone is still buzzing in her palm, a text from Tisha. Babe, are you okay? She ignores it. It buzzes again. A random number, not in her contacts. The message says, Feels. Hey Vanessa, this is Mallory Chen from page 6. Are you free to talk tonight? We're running a story tomorrow and want to make sure we get your side. She just stared at the screen. Feels. 3 months ago, hell, 3 weeks ago, a text message from page 6 would have been the moment she had been working for her entire life. It was the very door she came to New York to break down. She looked at the message. She looked at the vodka. Feels. She looked at her reflection in the dark window above the sink. She put the phone face down on the counter. She took a long drink from the bottle. And she did not text Mallory Chen back. The snow had stopped sometime after 1 in the morning, and by 2, Feels, the city was enveloped in that profound silence New York only finds a few hours a year, a silence so heavy it feels like it could crush you. Feels. In an apartment over on 63rd Street, Luca DeSantis carried Isabella, still asleep and wrapped in cashmere, from the couch to the bedroom. He laid her down on top of the covers, not even trying to undress her, Feels, then carefully removed her earrings himself and set them on the nightstand. She mumbled something in her sleep, an Italian word that sounded like something her mother might have once said. He pulled the blanket up over her, Feels, watching her for one long moment. Then he left the room, closing the door quietly, and walked down the long hall to his study, where he sat at a desk, turned on a green lamp, opened a laptop, and began calmly, with no sense of rush, to make a list. Feels. The list was clinical, just 3 columns. The first held a roster of names. The second detailed precisely what he would compel them to do. The third column, that was for the final deadline, and at the very top, in stark clean letters, he typed, Feels. Caldwell Holdings Board. Then the work began. Miles away in a downtown penthouse, Ryan Caldwell was still frozen on the edge of a bed that wasn't his, clutching a ring that wasn't his, staring at photographs that were, and that he wished to God weren't. Feels. The tears were gone now, but the thoughts hadn't arrived yet. That would come tomorrow, and the day after, and every Monday after that in a boardroom ready to cast him out. Feels. But for tonight, he just existed on the edge of that bed as the snow outside gave up falling, inside an apartment that was finally, achingly clean, with only the low whisper of the heater for company. He held the corpse of his marriage in his right hand, Feels, this tiny silver final object, and simply refused to let it go. That same low hum was the only sound in the penthouse as the sky over Central Park bled into gray, and Ryan Caldwell hadn't moved an inch in nearly 4 hours. The ring was still there, Feels. His hand had gone dead somewhere around 4 in the morning, but letting go felt like an action, and he was not ready for action. Not yet, Feels. At 6:11, his phone vibrated on the nightstand. He ignored it. It stopped. It buzzed again. Stopped. The third time he snatched it because 3 calls in a row at 6 a.m. on a Sunday is never good news. It was Bill Ostracki, Feels, chief counsel for Caldwell Holdings, 11 years with the company. 63 years old, lived out in Greenwich, a teetotaler, and had never, not once in 11 years, called Ryan before 9 a.m. Ryan, are you somewhere you can talk? I'm in my bedroom. Feels. Bill, it's 6 in the morning. I need you to listen to me. I'm listening. In approximately 45 minutes, the Wall Street Journal is running a story about last night. Ryan squeezed his eyes shut. Feels. They contacted me at 5. They got to Greg Moulton at 4:30. They rang your press agent at 4, who then woke me up at 4:15. I've been putting out fires ever since. What's in the story? The story, Bill said, Feels, is exactly what took place last night. Which version? The true one. Ryan, there is only one version. You brought a woman to the Hartwell Gala. Your ex-wife arrived with another man. Feels. She announced that your marriage has been legally finished since November, and then she announced her father is Marco Varelli, and she walked out. That's the story. The Journal has it confirmed by 3 sources in the room and 2 from the courthouse. Feels. The decree is a matter of public record. They found it, Bill. Yes. How is this a Wall Street Journal story? A silence followed. Not a long one, but it was the kind of pause a lawyer uses when he's deciding which version of the truth to present. Feels. And Ryan hated the sound of it. Ryan, you are the CEO of a publicly traded corporation valued at over $1 billion. Last night, you behaved like a complete fool in front of 400 of your most important shareholders. Feels. Your stock will dive at least 6 points on Monday. The chair of your board called me at 5:20 this morning to ask if you should even be on tomorrow's earnings call. Heels. Estraki, what was your answer? I told him, no, Bill. Ryan, listen to me. This isn't your friend calling. This is your counsel. You are not to go to the office tomorrow. You will not be on that call. You are to speak to no one. Not the press, not the board, Heels. Not your staff, not even your mother until you and I have a meeting tomorrow with Harriet Lowen. Harriet Lowen? She's a crisis PR specialist. Our firm uses her. She's good. She's insanely expensive and she is very, very good, Heels. And she has a 15-minute slot for you at 2 o'clock on Monday. We are taking those 15 minutes. Bill, I don't need a Ryan. What? Your ex-wife is the daughter of Marco Varelli. I heard her, Bill. Do you understand what that signifies? Heels. I understand my divorce just got more complicated than no, Ryan, no, listen to me. Heels. Listen to me very carefully. Your divorce is the simplest damn problem you have right now. I'm telling you this as someone who's known you for 11 years. I'm telling you what I would tell my own son. Your divorce is a done deal. The settlement was clean, Heels. She didn't take a thing that wasn't already hers. That problem is solved. Forget about the divorce. The divorce is finished. Then what's the problem? The problem, Ryan, is that for the last 4 months, maybe more, Heels, a man by the name of Luca DeSantis has been operating in this country. A man who, until September, split his time between Palermo and Zurich. And the reason he is in this country is currently in an apartment somewhere in this city, Heels. And that apartment is not yours. And she is not calling you. And her father has not called you. And his lawyer has not called my office. Do you have any idea what that means? Bill, I don't. It means they don't have to. Heels. It means that whatever it is they wanted from you, they've already got it. The divorce? That was just them being courteous. The line went utterly still for a beat. Ryan, yeah. Stay inside your apartment today. Do not open the door. Heels. Don't answer your phone unless it's me. I will be at your apartment at 1. Harriet arrives at 2. Stay off social media. Do not call Vanessa Cole. And do not, under any circumstances, call Isabella. Heels. You call Isabella, and I'll be gone from this firm before lunch. I am not doing it, Bill. Say the words. I'm not calling her. Good. 1 p.m. I'll bring breakfast. Try and get some rest. The line went dead. For a full minute, Ryan just sat there, Heels, phone in one hand, ring in the other. Then, with painstaking slowness, he reached over and set the ring on the nightstand. The moment his fingers let go, his hand began to tremble, as if he'd just set down something impossibly heavy. Sleep? Heels. There would be no sleep. He just lay back on the bed, still dressed in his tuxedo trousers and undershirt, and watched the ceiling lighten from dark gray to pale gray, and then to a flat, empty white. Heels. And a single thought played on a loop in his mind. That morning, back in August, some woman, Rosa Delgado, had appeared in his office and handed him an envelope. He'd scribbled a signature for it without a glance, deep in a conference call with Soul. Heels. He tried to summon her face now. Blank. He tried to remember the weight of the envelope. All he could feel was that it was thicker than a letter, but thinner than a package. He had simply dropped it in a desk drawer, went to his next meeting, Heels, and promptly forgot its existence until last night. And in those 5 months, his entire world had been secretly re-engineered right under him, like a magician yanking a tablecloth from under a feast. Only now, every single glass was hitting the floor. Heels. He finally forced himself up at 7, stood under a shower so hot it burned. He pulled on sweats, walked to the kitchen, and just stared into the open refrigerator for a solid minute before closing it, empty-handed. He just made coffee. Heels. He sat at the enormous glass dining table, the cream-colored envelope lying open before him, the stack of 43 photographs sitting there, accusingly. He drank 3 cups of coffee without looking once at the pictures. At 7:50, Heels, the story broke. He didn't have to read it. His phone began to vibrate violently on the table. The sound was off, but the screen flashed to life, over and over. A text from his mother, then another, a text from his sister, Heels. A text from his sister's husband, a man who had never once texted him, Heels. A call from an unknown number had to be a reporter, a call from Greg Moulton that he let go to voicemail. At 8:10, he finally reached for the phone, not to see the tidal wave of messages, but just to turn the damn thing off. But before he could, Heels, he saw the push notification on his lock screen. Caldwell Holdings CEO, ex-wife, Anna Varelli, a New York story. He powered it down. He just sat there in the tomb-like silence of his apartment, drinking what was now cold coffee. Heels. And for the first time in what felt like a decade, he thought about a girl from a Christmas party, way back in 2018. A girl who had laughed at something he said with her whole face, put a hand on his forearm and whispered, Feels. I don't normally talk to men like you. Feels. He'd asked her, what kind of man is that? And she'd replied, the kind my father warned me about. He had assumed she was joking. For 2 years, he had told that story at parties. The father joke. It was how he'd met his wife. It always landed. Feels. But no one was laughing now. At 12:40 that afternoon, across the city on 63rd Street, Isabella Versailles' eyes opened to a bed she didn't remember climbing into. She stared at the ceiling. It wasn't her ceiling. Feels. It took a moment for her to register the pressed tin, painted a soft white, with a single antique brass fixture. The light in the room was gray and gentle, filtered through heavy linen curtains that were mostly drawn. Feels. She could hear the hum of distant traffic, maybe the faint ring of a church bell a dozen blocks away, and beneath it all, the profound quiet of an apartment where someone was awake, but moving with deliberate care. She sat up. Feels. She was still in the platinum gown. Her earrings, however, were gone. Both pairs of diamonds were arranged on the nightstand and resting on a small square of black velvet, which meant someone had gone to the trouble of finding a small square of black velvet. Heels. She swung her legs out of the bed, barefoot. Her back had the specific ache that comes from sleeping in formal wear. A robe was folded on a nearby chair. It was long, heavy, and the color of cream, not hers. Too new, too crisp to belong to anyone just yet. Heels. She slipped it on over the dress, tied the belt, and walked barefoot from the room into a long, quiet hallway. Heels. And the scent of coffee reached her. She let it guide her. At the other end of the apartment in the kitchen was Luca, his body canted against a counter as he read from a tablet. He wore only a black t-shirt and dark jeans, barefoot, his hair still dark with water. Heels. He looked up when she entered. His face gave that barely perceptible twitch that for him was a smile. "Good afternoon," he murmured. "What time is it?" 12:42. "God, you needed the rest. I slept in my clothes." "You did," he confirmed. Heels. "In your bed." "In a bed," he corrected softly. "The guest room, not mine. I was on the sofa." She froze right there in the kitchen. "You were not. I was." "Luca, you're a grown man." "A grown man," he said. Who chose not to presume? Feels. She could only stare at him for a long moment. Feels. She had no idea what her face was supposed to do. She was exhausted, 33 years old, and had just set her entire life on fire in a room full of 400 people. And now here she was, barefoot in an apartment that wasn't hers. Feels. Wrapped in a new robe he had clearly bought just for her, while the one man who had earned the right to presume anything was making her coffee after sleeping on his own couch, all to be a gentleman. So she just walked over to him. Feels. She laid her palm flat against his chest. Rose up on her toes, he was only taller by a few inches, and placed her mouth on his. It wasn't a long kiss, not dramatic. It was a kiss that simply communicated, message received, thank you, Feels, and you can stop that now if you want to. Feels. All of it, in a single gesture. As she drew away, his expression had altered, just slightly. A faint color was rising in his cheekbones. "Noted," he said, his voice low. "I thought so. Coffee, please." He poured her a cup. Feels. He didn't even have to ask how she liked it, because of course he would already know. 1 sugar, no cream. He pushed it across the counter toward her. She hoisted herself onto a stool, her hands closing around the mug's warmth. Feels. "The Journal published the story at 7:50 this morning," Luca stated. "I know, you know. Helena sent me a text at 8. I saw it, and then I went back to sleep. Your father called last night." "When?" "Just after midnight. You were asleep." Feels. "I answered it. You answered my phone?" Feels. "I'd silenced it, but I saw his name. I knew he wouldn't stop." "And what did he say?" "He said to stay in the city until Wednesday, that your mother is coming down on Monday. She's bringing soup." Isabella actually laughed. The sound just erupted from her. Feels. Startling them both. "Soup? Soup. My mother is convinced soup is the cure for everything. Does it fix most things? Is this one of them?" Luca genuinely considered it, as if he were weighing the statistical probabilities. "No," he said at last. Feels. "But it's not a sip of her coffee. It was exceptional." She made a mental note to ask him where he got it. "Luca?" "Yes." "What did you do last night? After I fell asleep?" "Yes." He gave her a small, knowing look. Feels. Then he simply turned the tablet around and slid it across the counter to her. The screen displayed a battle plan. 3 columns. Names, actions, dates. She read the entire list, from top to bottom, as the coffee in her hands turned cold. Feels. The first name belonged to Peter Holbrook, chairman of the board at Caldwell Holdings. The action beside his name was a single, simple word, call. The date? Sunday. Feels. The second name was the lead partner at the hedge fund holding the largest position in Caldwell's stock. The action, lunch. The date, Monday. Third was the CEO of one of Caldwell Holdings' most critical suppliers, Heels. The action for him was dinner. The date was Tuesday. 14 names. 14 calculated points of collapse. Isabella read every single one. A few of them she read twice. When she was finished, Heels, she set the tablet down and just looked at Luca. "This is a lot," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "This is what you asked for. I asked for a divorce, Luca. You asked for a divorce. And in my kitchen in Zurich last October, Heels, you asked for the company to finance it. You said, and I remember this precisely, I want him to wake up one morning and discover the building has been sold out from under him. I made a note of it. You took the note." "I took the note, Isabella." "Yes." Heels. "I don't want to destroy his life." He just inclined his head, not debating, merely waiting. "I don't," she said again more firmly. "I thought I did. For such a long time, I truly did. But last night, standing in that ballroom, when I looked at his face, Heels, when I saw what happened to it, I knew I had stopped wanting to ruin him a long time ago. I just wanted him to know. I wanted him to know that I saw it all, and now he knows." She released a heavy breath. "And that's enough for me now, Isabella." Heels. "I know what you're about to say. Tell me." "You're going to tell me that what I want and what is about to unfold are two very different things. You're going to say the news is already out, the board is already in a state of panic, Heels, and the market is going to react how it reacts on Monday morning, whether I let you make these calls or not." Heels. "You're going to tell me that you're not the one in control of that. I knew you'd say it. But listen," she said, and that little word, us, it landed on the counter between them with the weight of an anchor. "I don't want us to be the ones who pull that trigger, Heels. I am not putting my hand on that knife." For a long, silent moment, Luca just watched her. "Fine," he finally conceded. "All right, fine. I will not make those calls. But I am making two of them. The two that concern your safety and your mother's home in Rye, Heels, and on that point I will not yield a single inch. The other 12 names, they are off the list, Heels. The market can have what the market wants." "Thank you. You have no reason to thank me." "Yeah," she said, looking straight at him. "I really do." And for the first time she saw it, a fracture in that impenetrable facade. It wasn't much, Heels. Just a subtle easing around his eyes, a tension he had carried for so long she hadn't even registered its presence until it was gone. "You are a very surprising woman, Isabella." "How am I surprising?" "I assumed you'd want him burned to the ground." "I did, Heels, for a while. Turns out, wanting to set someone on fire is an exhausting business. Turns out I used up all my matches just getting myself out of the building." "That's a very good line." "It's not a line, I just thought of it." "Well," he said, Heels, "it's a damn good thing you just thought of then, Heels." She laughed again, the sound coming more freely this time. Just then the apartment's doorbell chimed, a soft, discreet sound. Luca glanced at a monitor on the wall, gave a quick nod and pressed a button. A moment later, Matteo entered the kitchen, Heels, carrying a shopping bag and an envelope. "Theora, Matteo, your things from the Arland and an envelope from your lawyer. She said it is time-sensitive but not an emergency." "Thanks." And Matteo paused for a beat, which for him was a lifetime, Heels. "There are 2 reporters on 62nd and 2 more on Lexington. They are not here for us, Heels. They have no idea about this location, but they are within a 3-block radius." "How did they get anywhere near here?" "They followed us from the Arland. They were staking out the hotel last night. We left through the catering exit at 11:40, Heels, as planned. They were not on us then. My theory? They looked for your father's car this morning, couldn't find it, and are now making educated guesses." "Are we secure here?" "Yes. This address is not in any public records under your name, or the Don's, Heels, or Luca's. The building is owned by an LLC in Delaware, which is itself managed by a trust in Liechtenstein. It is not in Mr. Dantus's name. Of course it isn't." For just a fraction of a second, Matteo almost smiled. "A true collector's item, Heels." "I will be downstairs," he said. "Call if you require anything, Heels." And he was gone. Isabella looked down at the envelope from Helena Brandt and tore it open. One sheet of paper was inside. In Helena's own script, written with a black fountain pen, it read, "Belle Caldwell's lawyer contacted me at 9:10 this morning, Heels. He wishes to schedule a meeting for Monday afternoon. He does not wish to sue. He wishes for nothing. He wishes to, quote, confirm there are no further surprises. I informed him there would be no meeting as there is nothing to discuss. It is done, Heels. He asked if you would be willing to accept a letter. I told him that would depend entirely on the letter. He said he would send one. If Caldwell sends a letter, I will forward it. You do not have to read it, Heels. You do not have to respond. Should you choose to, I will advise you beforehand. That interview request from Vanity Fair is now offering $50,000 for your time to be donated to a charity of your choosing. I maintain my advice that you decline. Feels. Let me know. I will be in the office at 8 tomorrow. Isabella read it through twice. She folded the paper neatly, setting it on the counter. What does it say? Luca asked. His lawyer wants to send a letter. Are you going to read it? Feels. I don't know yet. That's honest. I'm giving it a try. She slid down from the stool. She just stood there, wrapped in the robe, coffee cup in hand. Out the window, 8 stories below, she could see a sliver of 63rd Street, Feels. A yellow taxi inching through the slush, a man walking a large gray dog, and the long shadows of morning that announced that noon was already a memory. Feels. Luca, yes, I'm going to my mother's tomorrow. I thought you were staying until Wednesday. I've changed my mind. I have to see her. She's going to make the soup regardless. Feels. And I would prefer to eat it in her kitchen than have Matteo transport it down I-95 in a piece of Tupperware. All right, come with me. He simply stared at her. To your mother's house? Yes. On a Monday? Yes. Isabella. Feels. I understand what I am asking. I don't believe you do. My father will be there. I know your father will be there. Bring your own car. He actually smiled then, a genuine smile. It was a small, startling thing, there and gone in an instant, but it was real. Feels. All right then, good. Feels. And so, as Isabella sipped her second coffee on 63rd Street, Vanessa Cole was on the floor of her small West 72nd Street apartment, wearing a sweatshirt and nothing more, a prisoner to her phone. Sleep hadn't come. Feels. A quarter bottle of vodka had been her only comfort, and she'd stopped only to avoid a hangover for whatever new horror the day held. She'd just laid there on the couch in that red dress for an hour, Feels, then tore it off and buried it at the bottom of the laundry like it was condemning evidence. She pulled on the sweatshirt, sank to the floor with her back against the couch, and just scrolled. By 8 a.m., her name was already in 2 headlines. Feels. The first one, a hit piece from Page 6, went live at 7:45. It was brief. It defined her as Vanessa Cole, 26, a part-time gallerist and occasional model, Feels, who sources claimed was a frequent companion to the tech billionaire for the last year. There was a photo, her in that red dress on the carpet at the Monte Verde, a bright smile, her hand resting on Ryan's arm. The caption read, Feels. Cole left at the Hartwell Gala last night. Left. They had literally carved Ryan's face from the image, leaving his shoulder, his arm. They cut her out of her own life, leaving her with just the pieces of his. The second story was a thread, Feels, started last night on some private Twitter account, Feels. This thread was quoting an anonymous person who claimed to be at table 3, and this stranger said she had to read it 3 separate times. The mistress looked like she'd just been told the kitchen was out of what she ordered, Feels. The comments beneath were a slaughter. She had 612 new followers on Instagram since last night, 31 new messages, a single missed call from her mother in Cleveland, one text from a girl she knew in high school just saying, Feels. OMG, is that you, OMG? But there was nothing from Ryan. That was the silence that kept replaying in her mind. Not one single word from Ryan since he'd told her to just go home, Vanessa, on the curb of Central Park West. Feels. She had sent him a text at 2 in the morning. She sent another at 4, and again at 6:30. She left a tearful voicemail at 7:12, a move she immediately regretted. Silence. He never wrote back. She wasn't a fool. For 18 months, Feels. She'd been telling herself she wasn't a fool, and while last night proved her wrong about some things, it didn't prove her wrong about this. She knew precisely what it meant when a man goes quiet the morning after. It meant she was over, Feels. She looked at her phone. The Page 6 journalist Mallory Chen had sent 2 more texts overnight, polite, gentle follow-ups. She stared at their conversation for a full minute. A choice presented itself. She could remain silent, Feels, letting their version of the story become the only one, and that version was simply the mistress, Feels. A title that would cling to her for the rest of her life. Or she could speak. She could give Mallory Chen the truth, that Ryan had lied about his divorce, that he'd dismissed Isabella as a nobody, Feels, that he'd dangled a whole Tribeca apartment in front of her for when the divorce was final, that he'd told her Isabella's father was just some pencil pusher. The truth wouldn't save her reputation. No, let's be honest. Nothing could do that now, Feels. But the truth would make him look so much worse. And in that moment, with her head throbbing and her self-respect crumpled in a laundry basket, making him look worse felt like salvation. She gripped the phone. Her thumbs flew across the screen. Heels, 3 sentences appeared. Then she froze. Heels. She deleted every word. Started again. Deleted it all once more. For the next 30 minutes, she just sat there on the floor, the phone resting in her lap as the pale Sunday sunlight crept through the blinds. In the end, all she wrote back was, Heels. Hi, Mallory. Not now, and probably not ever. Please remove my name from your contacts. Thanks for the offer. She set the phones aside and just remained on the floor for who knows how long, Heels, until she felt the wetness on her cheeks and realized the tears had returned, but quietly this time. The kind of crying that is completely silent. She was 26 years old. She had come to New York 4 years ago from a suburb of Cleveland, Heels, armed with 2 bags and a dream, Heels. And that dream, really, was to become the sort of woman that people wanted to photograph. Well, they took her picture last night. She had gotten her wish. And it turns out that getting what you want is just a small, ice-cold room, Heels. She wiped her eyes on the sleeve of her sweatshirt and pushed herself up. She went to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and found it nearly bare, a monument to the fact she hadn't needed to buy her own food in a very long time. Why would she have? Heels. Dinners were always at somebody else's place. She closed the fridge door. She opened her laptop on the counter, logged into her bank, and just stared at the number. Heels. It was so much lower than she'd imagined. It seems when you operate under the assumption that all your troubles are about to vanish, you stop paying attention to price tags. She snapped the laptop shut. She picked up her phone, yet again, Heels, and called her mother in Cleveland. Her mom picked up before the first ring finished, a response that screamed, I've been sitting here waiting. Vanessa, hi Mom, honey. Mom, and then her voice just broke apart. How humiliating, Heels. But she was talking to the one person who knew the girl she was before she became this. And when you're truly broken down, the facade is the first thing to crumble. Mom, I think I need to come home for a little while, Heels. Her mother, having already read 2 different articles about this catastrophe, and having stayed awake all night for this very call, paused for maybe a single heartbeat. Then she just said, Vanessa baby, how soon can you get on a plane? At the same time, Heels. Uptown in the safe house on 63rd Street, Isabella had shed the platinum dress. She was now in her own jeans, with a cream-colored cashmere sweater from the emergency bag Mateo had delivered. Her face was clean, her hair was tied back, Heels. In these clothes, she looked a decade younger than the woman in that ballroom, and a decade more like her true self. She was at the counter, attacking emails on her laptop. Heels. Helena's office, her father's accountants, a real estate broker about a property she was quietly acquiring in Brooklyn. And then her phone vibrated. A glance at the screen. Juliana. Julia. Belle, you saw the news. I saw it. Heels. Vanity Fair is offering $100,000 now. Tell Helena the answer is still no. I already told Helena, and she's saying no. I'm telling you because it's absurd. It is a little absurd. Your mother called me. Of course she did. Heels. She wanted to know if you were eating. Tell her I'm eating. Are you? I ate some toast, Belle. I'm going to eat, Julia. I'm in a house. It has food. Relax. I'm at the Arland, packing your things. Heels. What do you want me to do with the wedding pictures? Isabella took a moment before answering. There were 2 massive albums in a box in the closet at the Arland. Albums she had moved out of the penthouse back in August and had not looked at since. Heels. She could see the very first photograph in the very first album. Herself at 26 in a white gown gazing up at a man whose face she hadn't wanted to lay eyes on in a very, very long time. Burn them, she said. Juliana made a small contemplative sound. Heels. Belle, don't. I know, don't burn them. Just put them in a box, seal it with tape, write something on the outside that will make me not want to open it for 10 years. Put it away somewhere. That's simpler. Yeah, simpler. Consider it done. Heels. Thanks, Julia. Belle, yes? You handled yourself well last night. Thanks, I'm so proud of you. Heels. Isabella closed her eyes for a beat. Juliana had been in her life since she was 22. For 11 years, Juliana was the person standing behind her, brush in hand, before every mirror that mattered. She did not use that word lightly. Thank you, Heels, she said, her voice softer now. Call me on Wednesday. I will, she ended the call. She just sat there at the counter for a moment. Then she returned to her emails. At 1 in the afternoon, in the penthouse on Central Park West, the doorman buzzed up, Heels, announcing a Mr. Ostrowski was in the lobby with a delivery of sandwiches. Ryan Caldwell had dressed in khakis and a button-down, because you don't conduct a meeting in sweatpants, Heels, not even when it's in your own home and your enemy is a man 80 years from ever being your peer. Heels. He opened the door for Bill. Bill was dressed in a barber's coat and jeans, a look Ryan had never witnessed on the man, and he was carrying 2 paper bags from a deli over on 79th. Ryan. Bill. You look like you've been through hell. Heels. I feel like I have. Good. It's the proper emotional state for today. Bill began unloading the bags onto the dining room table. He pushed a wrapped egg sandwich and a coffee towards Ryan and took a seat. Heels. He paid no mind to the envelope and the photographs that were still sitting right where Ryan had abandoned them. Eat, Bill commanded. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. Harriet will be here at 2. She is going to ask you some very difficult questions. Heels, and you will need protein. Ryan peeled the paper from the sandwich. He forced a bite. Heels. He hadn't even known he was starving. He took a second bite. Bill, yes. What is actually going to happen tomorrow? Bill leaned back in his chair, took a deep drink from his coffee and set the cup down. Tomorrow morning at 9:30, Heels, the market will open and the stock will drop between 5 and 9 points. I'd bet on 8. By 10:30, the board is going to convene an emergency call. You won't be invited. By 11:30, Peter Halbrook is going to call me. Heels. He will inform me that the board is requesting you take a leave of absence, starting immediately, so you can handle what he is going to term personal matters. And while you are on your leave, Rebecca Alvaro will step in as acting CEO. Heels. He's going to want me to get your written agreement by the close of business, Monday. Heels. He'd imply, without ever needing to say the words, that if this deal wasn't accepted, a confidence vote was coming on Tuesday, and the numbers were there. Jesus. Bill just looked at him. You asked for the truth, Bill. No. You wanted a number, Ryan. Heels. I'm giving you a way forward. Ryan set his sandwich down, the appetite gone. So this is it. I'm out. You're taking a leave of absence. Leave is a very different word from out. A word we're going to use with extreme care for the next 6 months. Heels. While you're on this leave, a few things are going to happen. We will make a very public, very large donation to a charity completely removed from this situation. Heels. We will get you into therapy with a professional whose name we can mention if the press starts digging. And you will not be seen at any event with any woman for at least 1 year. Heels. And you will be silent. No posts, no comments on any platform anywhere on the internet for a minimum of 12 months. If we follow this path, every step, and if the company thrives in your absence, then there is a world, a possible world, Heels, where in 18 months you grace the cover of Forbes again, framed as the great comeback story. That is a possibility. I'm not guaranteeing it. I'm just telling you that path exists. But if we don't, then in 18 months, Heels, you become a cautionary tale whispered about in business schools, forced to sell your own shares at a loss because the board demands it. Bill, I'm listening. In your professional opinion, should I even think about contacting her? Heels. Bill just held his gaze across the table, the silence stretching into a long, heavy moment. Heels. Ryan, forget what you said at 6 o'clock this morning. I'm asking you now, person to person, as a human being? No. And why not? Because for 7 years you had every chance to reach out to her, Ryan. I stood there at that company picnic back in July, Heels, and I watched you introduce her to some new employee as my wife, Isabel. Her name was Isabella, and she gave you this smile, a smile I realized she'd been giving you for a very long time about things that weren't remotely funny. Heels. I went home that night and I told my wife about it. And my wife, she said, Bill, that marriage has already died. He just doesn't know it yet. And I argued with her. I said, no, Marjorie, you're just reading things into it. But she was right. Heels. Your wife was already gone, Ryan, back in July. And I've been holding on to that conversation for 6 silent months. Heels. I never breathed a word of it because it wasn't my place, but now it is my place. So the answer is no. You will not call her. You will not text her. You will not email her. No flowers, no books of poetry. Heels. You will not do any of the desperate things your mind will scream at you to do for the next 3 weeks when the silence of your house becomes unbearable. There isn't one single outcome where contacting her improves your situation. Heels. There are 16 where it makes everything so much worse. Ryan just buried his face in his hands. Bill, yes, I don't understand how this happened. Bill waited a beat. Ryan, he said, and the anger was gone from his voice. Heels. Replaced by a deep exhaustion. You got here the same way everyone gets anywhere. One decision at a time. A chime sounded from the door. 2 o'clock. That'll be Harriet, Bill announced, pushing himself up from the table. Heels. He picked up the wrapper from his sandwich, one he'd barely eaten, and crushed it into a tight ball in his fist. Ryan, sit up straight. Fix your shirt. You need to look like someone she can even consider working with. Feels. If that woman decides to walk out of this room in the next 45 minutes, you're not just a failure, you're a lesson taught in lecture halls by spring. Ryan straightened his shirt. He wiped his face. He pulled his shoulders back. Feels. The doorbell chimed again. He stood, walked through his own living room. No, his ex-wife's living room. A thought he refused to let land just yet, and pulled the door open for Harriet Lohan. Feels. The woman who was about to spend the next hour patiently explaining to him just how small his world was about to become. Feels. Harriet Lohan was a compact woman swallowed by a large wool coat. She did not offer a smile when Ryan opened the door. She didn't offer a frown either. She simply observed him, the way a veterinarian might observe an animal on the side of the road. Feels. Clinical. Detached. Already calculating which parts were salvageable and which would have to be amputated, Mr. Caldwell. Harriet, I want to thank you for. We're not there yet. She moved past him into the apartment as if he wasn't there. Feels. Unwrapping a long, dark scarf from her neck as she went. She passed him the scarf without a glance. Her eyes scanned the room and locked on to the dining table, where the envelope and the photograph were still laid out. She stopped dead. Feels. Bill? Yes. You didn't instruct him to clear this table? It didn't occur to me. Put them away, Mr. Caldwell. Do it now and not in a drawer in this room. Find a drawer in a different room entirely. I have no need to see them. Feels. And I will not have them in our line of sight for the next 45 minutes. Ryan gathered the pictures into a single clumsy stack. He carried them and the envelope into the guest room, forced them into the nightstand, Feels, and slammed it shut with a crack of finality. By the time he returned, Harriet was already seated at the table. A leather folio was open before her, a pen poised in her hand, her phone lying face down on the polished wood. Sit down, Mr. Caldwell. He sat. Feels. So this is how it begins. She says you will answer every question I ask and you will not lie. If you lie, I leave, and you will not be able to hire me back at any price. His lawyer, Bill, just nods. He knows you mean it. Feels. Her first question goes straight for the wound. Who else? Beyond the 3 women named by his ex-wife, who else has there been in the last 4 years? She needed names, timelines, and the likelihood of them talking to the media. Ryan just sat there, Feels, a deer in the headlights, looking to his lawyer for a rescue that wasn't coming. Finally, the confession. There was one other person, he muttered. Karen Dupree, an interior designer. It was about 2.5 years ago, very brief, maybe 6 weeks, Feels. But she doesn't work for him anymore. They haven't spoken in 2 years. Feels. Will she speak to a journalist? Harriet fired back. He offered the worst possible response. I don't know. She laid out his options. You either know for certain, you call her right now, or you give me the contact of someone who can find out. Choose. Feels. He started to say, I'll call her, but she cut him off. No. You will not be calling anyone for at least 6 months. Give me her number. A professional would be making the call to Karen. A very polite call that would end up costing Ryan a small fortune. Feels. By the time it was over, Karen Dupree would be signing a document ensuring her silence. Is she married? He thought. He heard she was engaged. Well, Harriet noted, that's going to cost you more. Fine. Is that everyone? He said yes. She just stared at him. Feels. Think again. Feels. There isn't anyone else, he pleaded. 5 women over 4 years. That was the extent of it. Harriet, the woman hired to fix this, just kept scribbling on her notepad, her handwriting a fast, ugly scrawl. On to the second question. Your marriage. Feels. The day she came into your kitchen in August and you dismissed her. I want that moment. No emotion, no excuses. Just the facts. Ryan was staring down at his own hands, noticing a small cut on his knuckle he had no memory of getting. He finally looked up. Feels. I hadn't slept in the same bed with her for 4 months at that point, maybe 5. Feels. He had told himself it was the pressure from work, but even then he knew he was lying. She stopped asking me how my day was sometime last spring, he admitted. For years, she asked me that every single day. And the worst part? Feels. He hadn't even registered her silence. It wasn't until July that it dawned on him, the quiet space where her question used to be. And his first thought? I remember feeling relieved, he said, the shame thick in his voice. Feels. Because it meant I didn't have to think of a way to lie to her about my day. I didn't have a convincing lie prepared. And then he just moved on. Harriet continued to write, her eyes never leaving the page. How often did she attend functions with you? Feels. Less and less. The last one was a founder's dinner in April. He could recall her being unnervingly quiet. Someone had asked her what she did for a living, and she'd just said, I write. He'd made some joke about her being modest. She didn't smile. Heels. He remembered that. Heels. He remembered the absence of her smile. And then Harriet asked, "What is it she writes?" Ryan looked up, his expression a perfect void. "I'm sorry," she repeated the question, her voice slow, each word a heavy stone. "What does your ex-wife write?" Heels. "Mr. Caldwell." His mouth opened, but no sound came out. A deep, painful flush crept up his neck. I don't actually know." And with that, Harriet set her pen down. She looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Heels. And in that look was the soul-crushing weight of her exhaustion. Not anger, just finality. Heels. It was the look of a 59-year-old woman who had met 1,000 men just like him and had absolutely no patience left for this particular brand of willful ignorance. "Mr. Caldwell, your ex-wife has published 3 novels." Heels. "She uses the name Belle Marchetti. It's her mother's maiden name." Heels. The blows just kept landing. Her 3rd book was a finalist for the PEN/Faulkner Award 2 years ago. Her 2nd novel was optioned for a film by a studio whose CEO you have personally had dinner with. All 3 were reviewed in the Times. Heels. "I read the 3rd one on a flight last month. It's quite good." Ryan just sat there, the foundations of his world crumbling into dust. "I am not telling you this to wound you," Harriet said, her voice like ice. "Your feelings are irrelevant to me today." Heels. "I'm telling you this because in approximately 4 hours, a reporter will ask me if you were aware that your wife was a celebrated author, and I require an answer from you." Ryan looked at her, his eyes shining with a moisture he was desperate to hold back. Heels. "Tell them I knew," he whispered. "Tell them I was incredibly proud of her. It was the wrong move." Harriet dismantled it immediately. "If I say that," Heels, "and that reporter then calls 3 of her closest friends who confirm you never read a single sentence, which you and I both know is the truth, then I become a liar. My name goes into the correction, and I do not do that. For anyone. For any price." Heels. "So a new story would have to be told. The true one." She turned to the lawyer. "Bill, what's our angle?" Bill, his face a mask of professional calm, replied, "He's in a period of learning. The past 6 months have been a time of difficult self-assessment." Heels. "He carries a deep regret for not being the partner his wife truly deserved." Heels. "No silver lining here. No attempt to paint him as a victim of circumstance. We're telling the story of a man who understands he has failed completely and isn't trying to run from it." "That's our foundation," Harriet murmurs, scratching it onto her notepad. Heels. "The foundation is I failed. Not things were messy. Not we drifted. Certainly not. We both had our faults because she didn't. He did. Those are the only words. And you're forbidden from saying them on camera for 3 months at least." Heels. "Your face would betray you, but you will practice them into a mirror every single morning starting tomorrow." Heels. "Come April, you'll be ready. One interview, carefully controlled with a journalist of my choosing. Do we have an agreement?" He gives a slow nod. "Good. Now for the truly difficult part." She snaps her folder shut. "Mr. Caldwell, you do understand this." Heels. "Don't you? Your ex-wife isn't coming to your rescue. He says he does. No, I need you to hear me. I've had clients who nod right where you're nodding, and 3 weeks later they're on the phone." Heels. "Begging their ex for some joint press release to set the record straight, and they get shut down. Hard. Your ex-wife will not accept your call, and her lawyer will not accept mine, not about anything beyond the logistics of your divorce." Heels. "Your ex-wife," she says, her voice dropping, "has closed the book on you. You're not a loose end she needs to tie up. You are a box, packed, taped, and stored away in a part of her memory she has no intention of ever visiting again." Heels. "Are you grasping what I'm saying?" He grasps it. "Good. Because the next thing I'm going to tell you to do, you're going to hate it." She taps the folder with her pen. "You are going to write her a letter." Ryan chokes out a sound. Heels. "But you just said not to contact her." A ghost of a smirk plays on Harriet's lips. "I didn't say that. Bill said that. Bill is your attorney. He's protecting you legally. I'm your PR counsel, and I'm doing my job." Heels. "Our roles will conflict twice today. This is the first." Bill lets out a sigh but says nothing. "You will write her a letter," Harriet says again. "By hand. Contain 3 statements. I was wrong. I am sorry. I will not contact you again. That's all. No buts. No if onlys. No requests. No offers. No explanations. Just those 3 sentences."
We'll place it in an envelope, address it to her counsel, and give it to Bill to have delivered."
Heels. Her attorney, Elena Brandt, will be the one to open it, to decide if it ever even reaches his ex-wife's hands. And in all likelihood, your ex-wife will never even see it, which is fine. Oh, the coldness of it all. Heels. The purpose of this letter isn't for her to read it. The purpose is for it to have been written, so that in 6 months, when some reporter asks if he's ever reached out, Harriet can state, he sent a letter back in January. In it, he accepted full responsibility and vowed to respect her privacy, a promise he has honored. The reporter notes it down, it checks out, and just like that, the I failed narrative has its first piece of tangible proof. Ryan is speechless. That, Mr. Caldwell feels, is public relations. Yes, it feels cynical, but it also happens to be the right thing to do, which is just a fortunate side effect. The letter is a debt a man owes his former wife, regardless. The reality that we can turn it into a talking point for a Times feature 8 months from now, we call that synergy. And then Ryan asks the most naive question possible. Will she be okay? Harriet just holds his gaze. Mr. Caldwell, your ex-wife is already okay. She attended a gala on the arm of one of the most powerful men in Southern Europe and systematically dismantled your public image during a 6-minute chat at table 3. Your ex-wife is going to be magnificent. The only question on the table tonight, she says, is whether you are going to be okay. And the answer to that hinges entirely on you, following instructions to the letter for the next 18 months, with absolutely no deviation. Can you do that? He says he can. Say it with conviction. I can do that, he repeats, finding some resonance in his chest. Better. Harriet rises, pulls on her coat, and makes no move to shake his hand. Mr. Caldwell, one more thing. This is off the record. Okay. Tomorrow, the board will request you take a leave of absence. You will accept the very first time they ask. And there will be no negotiation. No grand, self-pitying speech about how you built that company from the ground up, understood? Nobody cares. That speech makes you toxic. You say yes. You thank them. You offer to help with a smooth transition. Then you end the call. You do that one thing correctly tomorrow, you might have a future. You give that speech, you're a ghost. Are we understood? We're understood. Good. Write that letter tonight. Bill, I'll see you Tuesday. And just like that, she was gone. The door clicks shut. For a moment, a deep, profound silence fills the apartment. Bill pushes himself to his feet. He does that slow, pained stretch of an old man, hands on his lower, as if he's been fused to that chair for an eternity. She thinks you have a chance, he says. That was her thinking I have a chance. Oh, absolutely. If she didn't, you wouldn't be writing any letters. She would have simply vanished. That was her version of kindness, Ryan. Ryan's gaze fell to the polished wood of the table. Bill? Yes. What was the name of her book? Which one? The one that was a finalist for the prize. Bill goes still, he thinks. He begins to put on his coat with a slowness that speaks of a man buying time. I believe it was called The Quiet Room, he said. Could be wrong, Marjorie read it. Marjorie wept at the end, and Marjorie doesn't weep over books. Ryan, Marjorie is from Warsaw by way of Queens. Marjorie has cried over exactly 3 things in her life. Her mother's funeral, her daughter's wedding, and the series finale of some Polish cop drama from 1984 that we will not be discussing. She wept over your ex-wife's novel. I remember it because I came home from the office and found her at the kitchen island, the book on the counter, her face streaked with tears. I asked her, what happened? And she just looked at me and said, Bill, this woman can write. No, she did not. Marjorie had no clue you knew her. Marjorie read that book 2 autumns ago. It was her book club's selection. She never made the connection between Belle Marchetti and Isabella Caldwell. No one did. That was the whole idea, Ryan. She didn't want anyone to know, especially not you. Why? Bill just looked at him, and in his eyes was a pity that Ryan knew he hadn't earned. Because Ryan she didn't want the one part of her life that truly belonged to her to be poisoned by the part of her life that belonged to you. She just wanted one room, somewhere in the vast apartment of her life, that had a working lock on the door. That was all. You can hear the hum of the building's heat kicking in through the vents. Outside, the light over the park is fading to a soft, weary gray. Go write your letter, Bill said, his voice barely a whisper. I'll be by at 7 tomorrow morning to get it. Don't crease it strangely. No postscript. Don't even put a stamp on it. Just the 3 sentences. He lets himself out. And Ryan, he just sits at that table for a very, very long time. Eventually he stands, walks to the study at the back of the apartment, and slides open the bottom drawer of his desk. He removes a pad of cream-colored stationery. A gift from Isabella for his 35th birthday. He'd never touched it. He takes out a fountain pen he had also never used, and he sat down. He wrote the date at the top right corner. Then, for what felt like an hour, he just stared at the empty page beneath it. At last, he wrote, Isabella, I was wrong. I am sorry. I will not contact you again. Signed, Ryan. He read it over 4 times. Feels. He even considered it, adding a 4th sentence. He thought about saying something about her book. He thought about writing, I never read it, and I'm sorry for that. But then he could hear Harriet Lohan's voice, small and cold in the back of his mind, saying, Feels. There will be no buts. So he capped the pen. He folded the single page just once. He slipped it into a matching envelope and addressed it to Ms. Helena Brandt at Pritchard Hayes. It was the first truly honest letter he'd written in 11 years. Feels. Monday morning arrived the way Monday mornings do after a night spent staring at the ceiling. The light filtering through the curtains of the 63rd Street apartment was thin and rose-colored at 6:40, then a stark white by 7:20, Feels, and by 8 o'clock the whole bedroom was washed in the pale glow of the inside of a seashell. Isabella had taken the guest room. Again, Luca had the couch again, and there was a quiet understanding between them not to make a spectacle of it, Feels. They had a silent agreement to let the physical rhythm of their new life find its own pace, a pace that would not be hurried along by a ballroom encounter in New York or a flurry of tabloid headlines. Feels. At 7:30, a soft knock on the guest room door. Belle, I'm awake, making coffee. She emerged in the same cashmere robe, her hair tied up, her face scrubbed clean. He had made eggs, and he'd done it with a casual competence. Feels. A side of him she hadn't seen before, and for a reason she refused to examine too closely. She found it deeply touching. I didn't know you could cook. I can't. I can do eggs. I can do pasta. I can do coffee. That is the complete and total list. Feels. It is an entirely sufficient list. It has served me well so far. They ate in the quiet of the kitchen. A tablet on the counter was on, some business network muted, but the stock ticker still scrolled relentlessly across the bottom. Feels. And then at 9:31 a.m., the ticker bleeds red. Caldwell Holdings plummets 6 3/4 points in the first 90 seconds of trading. 18 minutes after that, it falls another 2. Feels. Isabella just watched the numbers cascade downwards. She said nothing. She felt nothing, and that was the part that truly stunned her. She had rehearsed this very moment in her mind for years, playing out countless variations. And in every one of them, Feels, she'd imagined some small, sharp feeling of vindication, a quiet little there. But what she actually felt was an enormous hollow void. The stock was a number. The number was sinking. It was no longer her story. Feels. A massive piece of her past was simply being dismantled somewhere far away, by people she would never know. Feels. And to her, it was all about as compelling as the forecast on a day she had no plans to leave the house. Luca watched her watching the numbers scroll by. You won't gloat, will you? I thought I might. Turns out, I don't feel like it. Good. Is that good? Feels. It's who you are. Finding that out is always good. She drained her coffee cup, walked back to the guest room. The robe was shed for a wool skirt, a simple black turtleneck, heels, and low boots, an echo of the girl she'd been in her mother's kitchen 1,000 times since she was 14. She threw a few things in an overnight bag, slipped the 2 pear-cut diamonds into a small felt pouch, zipping it deep into an inner pocket. Heels. At 10:15, Matteo appeared at the door. Heels. He had a garment bag draped over his arm. Signora, Matteo, your mother was on the phone. She told me to tell you she's making passatelli. Isabella let out a small laugh. Of course she is. She also wanted me to tell you that your Aunt Paula is there. Oh, Heels. She predicted you would say, oh, anything else? She said your father is making one of his faces. Which one? She didn't say. It's the one where he finds something amusing but has decided in advance that he will not laugh. Probably, Heels. Tell her we're leaving in 20 minutes. Yes, Signora. Matteo was gone. Isabella brought the bag into the kitchen. Luca had also changed. The suit was gone, replaced by a dark sweater over a dark shirt, jeans, heels, and boots that looked like they'd walked through a winter or two. Heels. He had the air of a man about to meet the in-laws, which, if you want to get technical about it, is precisely what he was. Nervous? She asked. No, liar. A little. He'll like you. He already likes me. He doesn't need to like me. Heels. He needs to decide if I'm going to stop liking myself somewhere down the line, and he hasn't made up his mind yet. That's a startlingly accurate assessment of my father. I've been paying attention. They went in 2 cars, her preference. He took his own, Heels, a dark sedan with a driver she didn't know. She took her father's car, which arrived at 10:40, with a man named Paolo at the wheel, a man who'd been driving for the Virilis for 22 years and had known her since she was 7. Heels. Signorina Paolo, it's been a long time. Too long. I do not. I look exhausted. You look good, she laughed, climbed into the back. The car eased away from the curb on 63rd Street, and the second car simply fell into place behind them, heels, holding a measured, respectful distance. Manhattan's grip finally loosened a bit after the bridge. The Hutchisons was clear. By 11:50, they were crunching up a long gravel drive in Westchester, flanked by the skeletal arms of January sycamores, heels. And there at its end stood the house she was raised in, a stone colonial with green shutters, a slate roof, and a front door her mother had painted 4 summers ago. A shade she insisted was Calabrian red, and her father simply called that red, heels. The door was open before her car even stopped. Her mother, posted at the kitchen window for the last 40 minutes, had been watching the drive, swinging the front door wide the very instant the tires hit the gravel. It was her signature move, heels. The thing Isabella complained about her entire childhood, and the very thing she now understood she would one day miss with a pain that would likely tear her apart. Teresa Varelli was 64 years old, short, heels, her dark hair pulled into a bun threaded with silver, and she came marching down those front steps wearing a cardigan and no coat in 18-degree weather, because why would she need a coat when her daughter was finally home? Bella, Mama? Come here, heels. Come here, Vienna. Isabella walked straight into her mother's embrace, heels. Her mother was a whole head shorter than her. She pressed her face hard into Isabella's shoulder, a fierce 4-second collision before shoving her back to get a proper look at her, then pulling her in again. You are thin. I am not thin. You are thin, heels. I don't care what you say. I'm feeding you until Wednesday. Mom, I have obligations Wednesday. Bella, you will sit at my table until Wednesday. Your obligations can wait. Mama, who is that man? Isabella turned. Luca had emerged from the second car, heels. He was just standing there on the gravel, maintaining his distance, hands hanging empty at his sides, a small leather case resting by his left foot. And he was, she realized, completely still, the exact same profound stillness he held in the ballroom, heels. It was how he stood when he was nervous and fighting to conceal it. Mama, this is Luca, heels. All right, inside with you. Luca, Mrs. Varelli, please. Mio, you'll get your death out here. Luca picks up the case, walking up the gravel drive. Teresa Varelli gives him the look, 2 full seconds of a forensic scan, from his feet to his eyes and back again, heels. Then she does something Isabella has witnessed only 3 times in her life. All 3 times it was for a man she was granting her absolute seal of approval. She reaches up, cups his jaw in her hand, meets his gaze, and gives him a single, sharp nod. Bravo, heels. Ragazzo, inside the both of you. Your father is in his chair. Aunt Paula is in the kitchen. And whatever you do, do not let her touch the coffee. She has no idea what she's doing. I heard that, Teresa, heels. The voice shoots out from inside the house. It's sharp, it's self-satisfied, and it's about 1,000,000 miles from warm. For just a moment, Isabella is swamped by a wave of childhood nostalgia before she climbs the steps and enters the house she grew up in, heels. And here's the thing, the hall smells exactly as it has for 33 years. Sage, lemon, something frying. The runner on the floor is new, a deep red, but it occupies the exact same space as all the ones that came before it, heels. The mirror over the table still bears that chip in the corner from 1998, when her brother Dario threw a baseball where he shouldn't have. Anna Dario, now in Milan with a wife, 3 kids, and a dog named Hugo, isn't even here, heels. But his coat hangs on a hook, as if he might walk through the door at any second. Aunt Paola is a sentinel in the kitchen doorway. She is 71, a widow 3 times over, stands 4'10" in her thick-soled shoes, heels, and possesses a merciless opinion on every soul she's ever encountered. She examines Luca with a look that makes Isabella want to apologize on behalf of his entire bloodline. This one, Paola says in Italian to no one in particular. This is the one, heels. Paula, what? It is an observation, Teresa. I am permitted to observe. Zia Paula, please. Bellacara, you are home. Come give your old aunt a kiss before your mother tries to fatten you into a coma. Isabella bends down, heels, kissing her aunt's cheeks and then her forehead, the precise, unchangeable sequence her aunt required, heels. Paola pats her face, twice, with force, then a final time, a little softer, you did well. Thank you, Zia. In the ballroom, you did very well. Your father recounted everything. I've been waiting all morning to tell you this, heels. You conducted yourself with Calabrian dignity. No raised voice, no tears, you simply left. A woman who weeps in a ballroom has already lost. You did not weep in the ballroom. No, I did not cry in the ballroom. Brava. Paola's head turns slowly, heels, her tiny 4'10" body pivoting like a weapon's turret until Luca is locked in her sights. You. Yes, Sonora. You did not touch her in the ballroom. No, Sonora. Not at all. Not at all, Sonora. You allowed her to do it herself. Feels. It was her battle to win. Paola holds his gaze for another long beat, then offers a short, definitive nod and turns back to Isabella. This one, she says again, a final judgment. This one is the one. From deeper in the house, a man's voice calls out, feels, low and laced with amusement. It's the voice of someone who has been thoroughly enjoying a drama he didn't have to orchestrate. Paola, leave the boy alone. I am not touching the boy, Marco. I am looking at him. Looking costs nothing. Feels. And then Marco Varelli materializes in the parlor doorway. He is 69 years old, 6'1", with a full head of white hair and a face that might have been handsome at 35, but at 69 is something far more compelling. It is interesting. Feels. He's wearing a gray cardigan, a blue shirt, reading glasses dangling from a cord, and house slippers, the perfect portrait of a grandfather, which he is, but he is also a great many other things. In this moment, though, standing in his own hall, feels, with his daughter before him, he is only Papa. Cara, Papa. He opens his arms and she walks into them. He holds her tight for much longer than he would in front of outsiders, longer even than she anticipated. When he finally pulls back, feels, his eyes are glistening, a sight you almost never witness from this man, and he makes no effort to hide it. You did well, Cara. Thank you, Papa. Feels. You did not cry. No, you did not raise your voice. No, he kisses her on the forehead. Then, taking his time, he turns his attention to Luca Dantas, who has remained by the door with the case, a statue of a man. Luca, Don Marco. You drove. Feels. I drove. You left Matteo. He is at the end of the drive. He felt it was best not to come up. He said you would understand. I understand. Come in. Coffee. Paola is not to make the coffee. Teresa is making it. Luca, you will sit at my right for lunch. Feels. Bella at my left. Paola, you may sit where you like, and you will remain silent for at least 15 minutes at a time. This is not my rule. Feels. It is the rule of our Blessed Mother, who invented it in 1967 specifically for you. Vaffanculo, Marco. Language, Paola. There is a young man present. He is not so young, and he has heard worse. Luca. Feels. Who had not so much as smiled since exiting the car, finally lets one show. It's only the second true smile Isabella has seen his face in 24 hours. They all move toward the kitchen. It is warm. It smells of broth and butter, feels. And the large farmhouse table is set for 5 with mismatched plates, a steaming loaf of bread, and a bottle of wine that has already been opened. Teresa is at the stove. Paola shuffles to her chair. A chair everyone knows is hers. Feels. A chair you do not sit in, and folds her hands. Feels. Marco gestures to the chair at his right hand, a place of honor, and Luca takes it. Without a word, Marco pours the wine first for Luca, then a small measure for Isabella. He fills Paola's glass, who murmurs a quiet grazie, and then half a glass for Teresa, feels, who declines to drink. Finally, he pours a full glass for himself. He lifts it to the family. To the family. The chorus is soft. They all drink. Isabella takes the smallest sip, and her eyes flutter shut. The wine is from a private cask of her father's, feels, and it tastes of winters she thought she had long since buried. Then the passatelli comes, golden threads of pasta swimming in a clear, perfect broth, dusted with nutmeg, feels. Teresa places the bowls one by one. Not a soul dares touch their spoon before Marco does. He lifts his. The table follows suit, and an absolute silence descends upon the kitchen, feels. It is the kind of quiet that exists only in the presence of food made by someone who holds your heart in their hands. Halfway through the meal, Marco sets his spoon aside. Luca. Yes, Don Marco. At my kitchen table, you will not call me Don Marco. Feels. In this kitchen, there are no Dons. Yes, Marco, better. Paola, her gaze fixed on her bowl, adds, he'll keep calling you Don Marco, Marco. He's from Palermo. It's in their blood. I am trying to change. Sonora, you must try harder. Paola, your soup. Feels. I am eating my soup. Feels. No, you are providing commentary while your soup grows cold. The soup cannot grow cold. Teresa's soup defies the laws of thermodynamics. Teresa, this soup today, it's the best you have ever made. You said that last time, Paola, and I meant it then, feels, and I mean it more now. His gaze finds Isabella, and his eyes for just a moment become impossibly soft. Eat, Cara, and so she eats. After lunch, feels, her father leads Luca into the front parlor, the room reserved for conversations that carry weight, and the door clicks shut behind them. They remain in there for nearly an hour. Feels. Isabella simply waits in the kitchen with her mother and her aunt, methodically peeling clementines. She doesn't ask what is being said, One does not ask. Besides, she has no need to. She knows precisely what is unfolding behind that door. Feels. Her father is subjecting Luca to a litany of questions that have no correct answers, only true ones. And Luca will either answer them or he will fail. If he fails, he will emerge from that room with the same unreadable expression he wore going in. Feels. And her father offer a cool, polite handshake at the door and wish him a safe journey. And that would be the end of it. Isabella would never lay eyes on Luca Dantas again. The single rule her father never broke was this. Feels. He alone decided who was permitted to walk back through that door. Feels. At 2:48, the parlor door swings open. Luca emerges first, followed closely by her father. Marco has a hand resting on Luca's shoulder. Isabella releases a breath she hadn't realized she was holding captive in her lungs. Her mother, Feels. Her back still to them at the sink, says a quiet, "Good." Paola, working at a clementine with a small silver knife, simply says, "I told you." Marco guides Luca to the coat rack, handing him his coat. He leans in, murmuring something in Italian. Feels. Too low for Isabella to catch. Luca whispers the reply. Marco gives a single sharp nod, pats Luca's shoulder twice, and then steps back. Bella. Yes, Papa. See him to his car. She rises and pulls on her own coat. Feels. She leads Luca down the stone steps, their feet crunching on the gravel toward the black sedan that has been idling all afternoon. They pause by the passenger door. How was he? She asks. He was your father. That's not an answer. Feels. He asked me 11 questions. I gave him 11 answers. He told me 3 things about you I did not know. He told me 2 things about himself. Things he said he hadn't spoken of in a very long time. He told me that the next time I visit this house, Feels. I am not to bring the leather case I brought today, because the only thing I ever need to bring here is myself. What was in the case? Money. Feels. Luca, that's just tradition. Papa would never accept it. He didn't. He had me put it in his desk. I said it was a down payment for your future nieces. He claimed he was joking. I don't think he was. A small laugh escaped her lips. I was afraid of that. Feels. She moved closer, flattening her palm against the lapel of his coat, the same way she had touched his chest in the kitchen that morning. But there was no kiss this time. She just stood there, her own breath forming a small, fleeting cloud in the January air. Feels. Go home. I will call you tonight. Call me, Isabella. Yes. Feels. Whatever you decide to do, about the wedding, about this city, about your life, you take your time. I will. You do not let another soul set your clock. I won't. Good. He slid into the car. The driver guided it down the long drive, Feels, past the skeletal sycamore trees and through the main gate. Isabella remained in the cold, her eyes fixed on the car until it was completely gone. Behind her, the front door creaked. Her father had come out, Feels, wearing a cardigan over his shirt and a pair of slippers, an ensemble her mother would surely crucify him for later. Papa Cara, you approve. I approved in September, Ella. Today was not a revelation, I know. Feels. I just needed to hear you say it. He navigated the steps gingerly in his slippers to stand beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. She leaned her head against him, Feels. Her father smelled of sage and bergamot and the phantom scent of a tobacco he had smoked for 41 years before her mother had made him quit in 2016. Some smells never quite leave a man. Cara, he said softly. Yes, you will be all right, Feels. I know. More than all right. Maybe. Not maybe, Papa. Yes, I was frightened for a moment, in the ballroom, just before I went in. Of course you were. Only a fool would not have been. Feels. You are not a foolish woman. I did not raise foolish women. But the truth was, she hadn't been afraid of him. She had been afraid of herself. Afraid that she would enter that room, look at him, and feel some unwanted ghost. A pang of sadness, Feels, a flicker of pity, some terrible echo of what used to be. And when I did walk in, I looked at him and nothing, absolutely nothing. And that terrified me more than any other possibility. Marco was silent for a long moment. From the house, Feels, she could see her mother and aunt at the kitchen window, failing spectacularly at pretending not to watch them. Cara, listen to me. I'm listening, Feels. When a love ends, it isn't always a grand explosion. Sometimes it is, and we know that sound. We cry, we shatter things, we call our mothers, we lose a summer to Italy, we understand that death. He paused. The difficult one is when a love dies quietly, Feels. You wake up one day, and the space beside you is cold. You never heard it leave. You don't know the hour it passed. That's silence. It makes you think you are the one who is broken. You are not. It means the love grew weary, and it departed. You did not kill it, Feels. He did not kill it. It simply ran out of road. Some of them do. Ours will not. Your mother's and mine. But some do. That feeling you had in the ballroom, the emptiness when you looked at him, feels. That is not proof that you are broken, Bella. That is proof the love was long dead and buried. Last night, you simply saw the tombstone for the first time. He took a breath. Come inside, feels. Your mother is seconds away from launching a full-scale assault if I stay out here in these slippers. She laughed and turned, his arms still secure around her, as they walked back up the gravel toward the house she was raised in, feels. Her mom swung the door open before they reached the top step, her aunt already moving to the stove to make another pot of coffee that she had expressly been told not to, feels. And Isabella Varley stepped through the doorway, into a kitchen filled with the scent of sage and lemon and simmering broth. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she was truly home, feels. The winter that descended after that January evening was one of the cruelest New York had endured in a decade. Isabella spent most of it in self-imposed exile, taking refuge in a guest cottage on her parents' land. Her mother, with a knowing silence, feels, had prepared it for her in early February, fitting it with fresh linens, a new lamp for reading, and a heavy wool blanket that had belonged to Isabella's grandmother. She had gone up for a weekend and simply stayed. One weekend bled into a week, feels, then 3. By the end of February, her mother no longer asked when she was returning to the city. She just began ordering Isabella's favorite pasta in bulk. The cottage was a small 2-room sanctuary, hidden at the far end of the property, feels, its windows looking out into the deep woods, feels. Every morning, Isabella worked at a small table by the window, writing in a notebook from 7 until 11. It was a novel she had started 3 years before and abandoned, feels, but it had returned to her with a vengeance the week after the confrontation in the ballroom. She could not explain the feeling, so she did not try. She wrote about a woman who had lost a child. The woman was not her, the husband was not Ryan, feels. But the grief that she had carried like a stone for 7 years, she'd poured every last ounce of it into the ink on the page. And as she wrote, the immense weight in her own chest began to shrink. Day by day, until by the 1st of March, feels, she could read the words aloud and not feel the blood drain from her hands. Feels. Luca appeared on the weekends. He never pushed. He would arrive late on Friday nights, held up by some meeting in the city, and would stay in a guest room in the main house. Her mother had put him there on his first visit, feels, and the arrangement was never questioned. He shared meals with the family on Saturdays. He walked with Isabella through the woods behind the cottage on Sundays. He never asked what she was writing. He never asked when she was coming back, feels. He never really asked her anything at all. And slowly she began to understand that his not asking was its own form of question, a question so patient, it was fundamentally changing the very fabric of who she was, feels. It was a Sunday in the heart of March, on a path worn familiar by more than a dozen walks, when she just stopped, didn't look at him. I think, she said into the trees. I want to get the rest of my things from the Arland. He answered, all right, feels. I don't have a place for them yet. All right, and I'm not ready for them to go to your apartment on 63rd. I'm not asking you to be. I know. Good. A small silence, and then she said, but I think I might be come summer. All right, feels. He watched the wind move through her hair, waiting. Is that really all you have to say about it? What is it you need me to say? A laugh broke from her then, a real one, and she started walking again. He fell in step beside her. Luca. Yes, feels. Does it wear on you? Being this patient. He considered the question the way he always did with her, as if turning it over and over in his hands to feel its weight. Feels. No, he said after a moment. It's the opposite. For 15 years, my life was about moving fast. A patient life is simpler. I didn't know it would be. I learned that this winter. She looked over at him. You're telling me I taught you something, feels. I'm telling you that you gave me the space to learn it. They're not the same thing. No, she agreed. They're not. They walked on. By the time March bled into April, the noise from the gala had mostly died down. And then a long, feels, quiet story appeared in the New Yorker. It was written by a woman from Table 7, someone who had sat on the story for 10 weeks, checking every quote, confirming every detail. The article was brilliant, and in places it was just brutal, feels. Ryan was named only once in the opening paragraph. After that, he was referred to again and again, feels, as nothing more than her ex-husband, a phrase Helena Brandt later said was the single most devastating thing you could do to a man with that particular kind of ego, feels. Vanessa's name never even appeared in the piece. By then, she was already back in Cleveland, had been since early February. In a turn no one saw coming, she'd enrolled in a paralegal course and was seeing a high school history teacher named Marcus Fields, a man who, when the article was published, knew nothing about any of it. The New Yorker story closed with a sentence Isabella read 3 times that morning, and then she put the magazine down and never picked it up again. The sentence was this: Fields. The most dangerous thing a man can do is assume that a quiet woman is a small one. Luca read it too. He didn't say a word. He just left the magazine on her kitchen counter, walked outside, and began to split wood with her father for an hour. Fields. It was this new ritual they had on Sundays, a silent communion that none of the women in the family could quite figure out. Fields. Ryan Caldwell took a leave of absence from Caldwell Holdings on the first Tuesday in February. There was no speech to the board. When they asked, he simply said yes, just as his lawyer Harriet Lowen had coached him. He thanked them. Fields. He asked how he could smooth the transition. Peter Hellbrook, as Bill would tell him later, looked completely stunned. Peter had walked into that meeting braced for a war. He left the call with the bewildering thought that maybe, just maybe, Fields. Ryan Caldwell was a different man than he had been 3 weeks prior. He was, and he wasn't. The shift was smaller than Peter Hellbrook imagined, but it was there, and it was real. Fields. So Ryan is banished to a rental house in Katona for the spring. Not for the scenery. His therapist insisted, knowing that if he was left alone in that penthouse, he would do something spectacularly self-destructive. His new existence? Fields. Therapy 2 times a week, no alcohol, no women. He read an entire book, the first time in 11 years, a truth so pathetic his psychiatrist made him say it out loud. And the book he chose to read on a quiet Saturday in April? Isabella's 3rd novel. Yes, Fields. That one, the one that was nominated for the Panon-Fallner. Fields. And when he finished it, he just sat there, the book closed in his lap, and he wept. A raw, ugly cry for a full 20 minutes. But here is the change. He doesn't call her. He doesn't write some desperate, sprawling letter. He actually listens to Bill, Fields, his therapist. He puts the book on a shelf, shows up to his appointment on Monday morning, and says it plainly. She can really, really write. And I spent 7 years pretending that wasn't true, and I need to acknowledge what a monstrous thing that was. Fields. His therapist, a Dr. Freitas with kind eyes and an office full of green things, just looks at him and says, "Good. That's the beginning of guilt that serves a purpose, Mr. Caldwell." Fields. Does he return to his seat at the head of the Caldwell Holdings table? Of course not. The leave of absence becomes a quiet, permanent resignation by June. The press release frames it as amicable, a mutual decision. It was not mutual. It wasn't friendly, Fields. But he doesn't fight it because Harriet told him not to, and because he finally understands. The company was never his. The apartment was never his. The marriage was never his. He was just the face of the brand, Fields. And he'd played the role well for a very long time, but the performance was over. Now he had to figure out who the man behind the mask actually was. He sells the penthouse on Central Park West at the end of July, takes a financial hit he can afford, Fields, and buys a smaller place uptown that his sister found for him. He moves in with 12 boxes and none of the art from his former life. Fields. The paintings were sent directly to an auction house. He didn't even go. He just stands there in the empty penthouse on his last day, the July sun pouring through windows into a room whose color he couldn't even recall, and he makes himself a promise. Fields. He will not become a tragic story, and he will not become some celebrated comeback tale. He will just be a 42-year-old man in a smaller apartment, learning how to exist in his own skin without hating himself. It wasn't a heroic vow, Fields. It wasn't inspiring. It was, as Dr. Euphers told him, the very first plan he'd ever made that wasn't rooted in complete fantasy. By then, Isabella was long gone. But not to Luca's, not yet. Fields. She found a place in the West Village, an entire floor of an old building. Aged wood floors, enormous windows, and nothing at all on the walls. On the first day of July, she just sat on the floor of the empty living room, Fields, a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands, and watched the sun make its slow journey across the bare wood for a solid hour before she even thought about a single box. Her mother came to help. Her aunt came to find fault, of course. And on the second day, Fields, Luca arrived with a hammer and a level and quietly began putting up 6 bookshelves. No one had asked him. When he finished, he said, "I won't do this again, not if you don't want me to." Isabella just looked at the shelves and said, "No, the shelves are good. Fields, the shelves can stay." Fields. And that became their quiet joke for the rest of the summer. She finishes the novel in August, a fury of work. She hands it to her agent on the last Friday of the month. Fields. The agent calls her the following Tuesday and just sobs into the phone for 90 seconds before she can manage to speak. And when the words finally come, all she can say is, "Belle, this is it. This is the one. My God, this is the one." Feels. Isabella is in her kitchen, the phone pressed to her ear, staring at the shelves Luca built back in July. She doesn't cry. Her agent is crying enough for the both of them. But a feeling spreads through her chest. Feels a warmth in a place that had been cold for a very, very long time. Feels. The book comes out the following spring. It wins every award that matters. She does a short, obligatory tour and then vanishes. No television. She grants a single interview to a journalist who spent 3 months writing her these careful, thoughtful letters by hand. The interview was fine, and after that she simply went silent for a good long while. At the end of August, she and Luca drive upstate for her father's 70th birthday party. The house is overflowing. Feels. Dario has flown in from Milan with his wife and their 3 children. Aunt Paola is there from her condo in Yonkers, carrying a pot of something mysterious that she refused to let anyone touch. Feels. 2 of her dad's oldest friends from the neighborhood even made the trip up from Philadelphia. Feels. At some point, after the cake was served but before the espresso was poured, her father stands at the head of the table. He taps his glass just once and the room falls quiet. "I am not giving a speech," he says. "Yes, you are, Marco," Aunt Paula calls out. Feels. "Paula, I'm not. I am giving 6 sentences, 1 for each decade of my life and 1 extra because I feel like it." He raises his glass. 1, I have been a very lucky man. 2, I have not deserved all the luck I've been given. 3, Feels. My wife is the only reason I am still here after the years when that luck ran thin. 4, my son Dario has given me 3 grandchildren and has made me proud every day of his life, and I have not told him that nearly enough, so tonight I am telling him. Feels. Dario, sitting at the far end of the table, just presses his face into his napkin. 5, my daughter, Bella, did something this year that gave me a strength I will carry for the rest of my days. I will not say what it was because she knows, Feels, and she hates it when I make speeches about her. 6, I will continue to live as long as I am able, and I will go quietly, and no one in this room is permitted to make a scene. He took a breath, and 7, sin, tin, Feels, the whole table chanted back in unison. Isabella, seated beside him, reached out and simply took his hand. He gave it 1 firm squeeze and held on for a very long time. Feels. Luca was on her father's other side. His eyes met hers over her father's shoulder, and he didn't smile. He never smiled in crowded rooms. But his gaze held a softness she had never seen before. And when her father finally let go of her hand, Feels, he reached for Luca's and held on to his for just as long. Not a single word passed between them. The wedding, the real one, Isabella had wanted, took place the next October in a small church in Rye. There were only 41 people. Aunt Paola wept. Feels. Dario's youngest was the flower girl. She threw all her petals in a heap on the floor and then burst into tears because the flowers were all gone. Feels. Isabella chose a simple cream dress, a piece that had once belonged to her grandmother, Constanza, and was altered by a woman in the Bronx, the same one her mother had trusted since 1974. Feels. There was no predictable wedding march as she walked the aisle. Instead, a lone cello played a Neapolitan melody, a song friend of hers used to sing to her when she was just 4. Luca waited at the altar, stoic in a dark suit, and of course he shed no tears. Feels. But as she reached him, as she stood there before him, he reached out just for a moment, and his 2 fingers brushed the line of her jaw. For a man like him, this was an earthquake. She knew, he knew, she knew, and that was all that mattered in that church. Feels. Later, a small dinner at the house. Aunt Paula eventually trapped Luca in the kitchen, launching into a winding tale in Italian about her deceased second husband, a story he wouldn't repeat to Isabella for years. Feels. A very drunk Dario commandeered the living room, singing a song Isabella hadn't heard since she was 12. Her parents danced slowly in the kitchen to some forgotten song on the radio. Isabella watched them from the doorway. Feels. Feeling the steady pressure of Luca's hand on her back, and a single thought crystallized. This is everything. Feels. 3 weeks in Italy followed the wedding, and then they were back. Children took far more time than she ever expected. She was 34 now, and a quiet fear began to set in that it might never happen. Feels. There was one private breakdown with her mother over a weekend, and then it was back to her desk, back to writing for another 6 months. Then, from out of nowhere, in the spring of her 35th year, she learned life was on its way. A daughter. Feels. They called her Costanza for Isabella's grandmother. The girl had her father's quiet soul and her mother's eyes, and a temper that Aunt Paula claimed as her own legacy, but that her mother swore was a Varzeli family curse stretching back 4 generations. Eels. A son came 2 years after. Eels. They chose the name Matteo for their son, a tribute to the man who drove Isabella's cars for so many years, a man now retired in Queens with a garden he cherished and a grandson he walked to school. When they shared the news, Eels, the old man fell silent for a full minute before he finally spoke. Sonora, I will not cry in this kitchen. This is not the kitchen for that. And then he wept, right there by her island, still in his coat. Eels. So Isabella hugged him for the first time in 21 years. And he let her, which was another first. The biggest consequence, though, the planned move to Europe was officially dead. Eels. Luca had truly believed they'd be gone. His entire existence had been defined by places like Polmo and Zurich. But by the time their daughter Costanza was 2, the truth was unavoidable. Eels. Isabella was never going to live more than a day's journey from her parents and her aunt. And so Luca, who had learned in his 30s that loving a woman means learning to live among her tribe, simply adapted. He kept his Zurich apartment, Eels, flying over 4 or 5 times a year. Once Costanza was old enough, she started going with him. Then it was Matteo's turn. The kids grew up fluent in 3 languages. Eels. Treating international terminals like a second home. Small gift Isabella was glad to give them, a world she never knew herself. Eels. Luca's profession also went through a quiet evolution. By the time Costanza turned 4, the kind of work that required sitting motionless in rooms filled with dangerous men had been passed on to younger guys. Men who were, in his words, Eels, less tired and more hungry. He kept his influence in a few ventures, sat on a few boards, but the business never, ever came to the dinner table. His children had no idea what their father really did, and Isabella would never be the one to tell them. Eels. That was Luca's truth to share, and she trusted he would detonate that bomb when the time was right. Eels. Her father died that summer, the year Costanza was 7 and Matteo was 5. It wasn't a sudden blow. His illness had taken hold in the spring, so the family knew what was coming, and they all had the chance to say goodbye. A grace not everyone is afforded. Eels. He passed in his own bed with his wife beside him, his children at his feet, and his sister downstairs making coffee she would never drink. Isabella just sat, holding his hand, and didn't cry. Not until later. When the wave finally hit Eels, she walked deep into the woods behind her cottage and let the grief tear through her, alone. That kind of loss doesn't get smaller. It just gets older, taking up residence in a spare room of your soul while you learn to live in the rest of the house. Eels. Luca had barely known his own father. He understood her silence without needing a single word. He didn't offer fixes. He made no promises that it would get better. He just cooked dinner on the nights she was adrift. Eels. He read to the children when she was a ghost in her own home. He would just sit next to her in the darkness of their bedroom when words were impossible. Then one night, 2 weeks after the funeral, Eels, she was frozen at the kitchen island at 3 a.m. when he came downstairs. Barefoot, in an undershirt, he pulled a stool up beside her and just said her name, Belle. Eels. And all she said in return was, I know. It was the only conversation they needed. The following winter, her mother came to live with them. She would never have said she was lonely, but she was. Eels. And she would never admit the large house in Rye was a burden, but it had become one. So Isabella and Luca moved her into a top-floor bedroom that they now understood had been waiting for her all along. Her mother showed up with 4 suitcases, Eels, a small wooden crucifix from her own mother, and the framed black-and-white photograph of a 26-year-old Marco Varley that had watched over the Rye dining room for 51 years. Eels. She set the picture on her new dresser, and there it remained. Aunt Paula, however, never moved in. 2 years after Isabella's father passed, she died during an afternoon nap in her Yonkers condo. The exact exit she had always prescribed for herself. Eels. The family generally saw it as the only fitting departure for a woman of her magnitude. At the funeral, Isabella's mother began to laugh and cry at the same time because a man behind them whispered that Paula had been a handful. Eels. Teresa turned around and declared at full volume, she wasn't a handful, Angelo. She was a 7-course meal, and you were never man enough for the dessert. The entire pew just dissolved into laughter. Eels. The years began to blur. Costanza, at 15, announced her intention to become a lawyer. Matteo, at 13, declared he would be a chef. Luca, at 54, announced his temples were going gray, and he was seriously considering hats. And Isabella, Eels, at 48, published her 6th book, a story about an old man's slow death surrounded by love. The dedication was only 2 words, "To Papa," she cried again as she wrote it. And she thought of Ryan, but less and less often. The hatred was gone. Feels. In that first year after the gala, she had been pure ice, a silent fury that Luca saw and gave space to. Feels. By the second year, the ice had started to crack. After 5 years, it was gone. She'd hear whispers about him occasionally. He sold the company, the one that was never truly his, and walked away with a smaller fortune than expected. Feels. He moved into that smaller apartment and simply stayed. He never remarried. He had 2 quiet relationships over 10 years, with a teacher and then a doctor, but nothing public. He was working, as Helena Brandt once offhandedly mentioned, Feels for a small nonprofit focused on literacy in prisons. He made sure his name was attached to nothing. Feels. He had, as Elena had phrased it, become something utterly unexpected. The sort of man you no longer have to think about at all. And Isabella's was grateful for that from a great distance. She felt no ownership over his transformation, took no credit, Feels, but she was glad it occurred. It's the kind of gladness you feel when someone you once knew finally stops being a catastrophe. 12 years after that night at the Monteverde, on a Saturday in January, Isabella was at her kitchen window, washing lettuce. Feels. Costanza was on a train home from college. Matteo was in the living room, lost in a fortress of 6 open cookbooks. Feels. Luca was in the snow-covered backyard, wrestling with a shovel while her mother critiqued his technique through the glass. As the cold water ran over the greens and the winter light outside began to fade to blue, Isabella looked at her husband, her son, Feels, her mother at the table, and she thought about the woman she had been at the Hartwell Gala. That woman was 33, dressed in platinum silk and diamonds, operating on a calm she had manufactured for 6 hours in a hotel bathroom. Feels. That woman was convinced she was entering a ballroom to tear something down, and she had. She walked in and methodically dismantled a public life with a few quiet sentences in front of the entire world. Feels. And if the story had stopped there, it would have been a hell of a revenge plot, a clean, satisfying victory. Isabella would not have been ashamed of it. But the story never ends there. That was the piece she finally understood. Feels. A woman who enters a room to detonate a life can walk out with all the shattered fragments, only to realize over a long winter that the fragments were never the point. The target wasn't the life that was. The target was a different life. Feels. And you don't get a different life by smashing the old one. All you get is an empty space. The new life arrives, if it arrives at all, from what you choose to build in that void after the smoke clears. And she had filled that void with so much. Feels. She began to fill the space. One novel laid down like a foundation stone. Then another. She built a marriage, a real one, not for appearances but for the foundations of a soul. Feels. Roots took hold in a house where the floors groaned under the weight of a life lived, near a shelf Luca had put up in the space of a single afternoon. 2 children were added to the quiet census of their home. Her mother was given a room, a whole world, Feels, on the top floor. She wove in the ritual of Sunday mornings spent lost among the trees. She even learned to make a space for a heavy, silent grief that had come to stay. And always her father's voice echoed in the chambers of her mind. Feels. That sound that still whispered, that murmured, brava, that warned her. Don't you dare think you can carry this world by yourself. She pressed it all down, all of it, into the hollow where a different life once burned. Feels. And across 12 years, these pieces didn't just connect. They sutured themselves together into a life she never could have imagined on the night she turned her back on the Monteverde. Feels. That night, victory was the only thing she could see. But victory, what a small, fleeting thing it turned out to be. It lasted, maybe, for the space of 2 hours. It vanished the moment she sank into the back of a dark car on Park Avenue. Feels. Everything that followed was just living. And it was never a victory, because that isn't the right word for it. A victory is an act of conquest against another. What she did next was an act of survival for herself, slowly, over a long, Feels, quiet stretch of time, surrounded by the few people who were truly watching. She began to turn off the flow from her old world. She rinsed the lettuce in the strainer, shaking off the past. And from behind her, Feels, her mother would say in Italian that the greens never needed to be washed for so long. Feels. She said it, every Saturday. And for 12 years, Isabella had washed the lettuce for that exact length of time, every single Saturday. It was a silent, gentle war neither would ever concede. The back door complained as it opened, and in walked Luca, heels, with snow on his boots and dusting his shoulders, his face flushed raw from the winter's bite. "Your mother," he breathed, "is going to have me splitting firewood in June, July, and August if she keeps on about that shovel." Heels. "She's going to have you splitting wood in June, July, and August no matter what. I'm aware you're going to make me do it no matter what. I know, Luca. I know. Come here." He crossed the room. Heels. He pressed his frozen hands to the small of her back for a shocking second, and a sharp cry escaped her before it melted into laughter. And from the table, her mother simply sighed, "Madonna." And from the couch, a new voice, Matteo's, added, "Gross." Heels. And Luca, his voice a low whisper right beside her ear, asked, "You good, Belle? I'm good, Luca." "Yeah, it is good, isn't it?" He knew. He always knew precisely what she meant. He rested his forehead against hers just for a moment. "Yeah, Belle." Heels. "It is." Outside, the snow had begun its descent again, falling in slow, heavy flakes, each one the size of a small coin. It was the same kind of snow that had been falling on Park Avenue 12 years before. Heels. When a woman in a dress the color of moonlight walked out of a grand ballroom and straight into the rest of her life. But inside this kitchen, a radiator hummed its steady tune. The washed lettuce sat in its colander. Heels. And a train from Providence was carrying a 19-year-old girl down the Hudson line, pulling her toward her mother's house. The oven was warming. A boy on the couch was weighing the merits of two different recipes. Heels. And a woman at the table was humming a melody her own mother had taught her 65 years ago. Heels. And a man was letting a wet coat fall from his shoulders. Because here is the final, quietest turn of the story. Isabella had come to understand that the greatest revenge isn't found in making someone else small. They do that to themselves. In the end, Heels, if that is the kind of person they are, and if they aren't, then no amount of stage drama in a ballroom will ever be enough to diminish them for you. The greatest revenge is not revenge at all. It is what you build with your own hands in the silent, Heels, unremarkable years that follow the war, with the people who were waiting in the wings for you to finally see them. The greatest revenge is a Saturday afternoon in January, with damp lettuce, a mother's gentle correction, Heels, and a husband's cold hands on the small of your back, Heels. She had walked into that gala to win a war that it turns out she had already won long before. It just took her 12 years of winter Saturdays in a quiet kitchen to understand the truth of it. The gala was never the victory, Heels. The victory was everything that came after. The victory was, is, and always will be the slow, painstaking work of building a life after the old one has been burned to the ground, of choosing each morning, Heels, to remain in a life you constructed by hand instead of one that was simply assigned to you. The snow continued to fall. The radiator hummed on. Someone, likely Matteo, flicked the switch on the kettle. Her mother pushed herself to her feet, Heels, hands pressed flat on the table for support, and made her slow way to the stove to begin a dish that had no need of being started. Luca hung his coat on its hook. Outside, the shovel lay right where he'd left it, Heels, and a soft white blanket was already settling over it, Heels. Isabella Varley, 45 years old, a writer, a wife, a mother, a daughter, stood at her own sink in her own house, with the entire constellation of her life behind her. She watched the snow fall and didn't spare a single thought for the ballroom, Heels, or the platinum dress, or the man who had been sitting at table 3, or any part of it. She was thinking about dinner. She was thinking, the lettuce is done, and Costanza's train will be here at 6, Heels, and I have to remember to get the bread from the freezer. That was the true ending. The one they never tell you about when you are 33 years old and planning your grand campaign, Heels. The story you are truly writing is not the one you march into a ballroom to declare, Heels. The story you are truly writing is the one where, on a perfectly ordinary Saturday a dozen years later, you realize you don't need to tell the ballroom story anymore. At all. And that, in the quiet conclusion, was what she had rebuilt, Heels. Not an empire of glass and steel, not a kingdom, a kitchen, a family, a life so profoundly good that the most deafening night of her past had softened into just another story, one that happened a long time ago, Heels. It belonged to a younger woman she remembered with a sort of distant fondness, the way you remember a friend who helped you haul boxes one sweltering summer and then moved away. The one you thank, years later when you are finally truly home, Heels, for every single thing she did to get you there.